Well, good morning. Glad to have everyone here for the second day and hopefully just the morning of the second quarterly meeting of the Colorado River Water Conservation District. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I think the first thing I'd like to do is have everybody in the audience introduce themselves. I think appreciate you being here. And if you're going to start on the front left, please introduce yourself and who you're from.
I'm Sue Hansen. I'm the Montrose County Commissioner.
Thank you, Sue.
And I'm Ben Tisdale, Uray County Commissioner.
Gail Schwartz, former senator and now CRWCD representative.
Scotty?
Scott Hummer, Water Division 6.
Orla Bannon, Western Resource Advocates.
Deirdre McNabb, 4M Ranch, Yampa White Green Roundtable, and White River Alliance.
Angie Fowler, SGM, and Colorado River Roundtable at large voting member.
Uh-huh.
I'm Sierra. I'm just a CMU student here in support of my mom.
Yeah, I see.
Alyssa Logan, Senator Michael Bennett's office.
I'm Jim Plumhoff. I'm General Counsel for the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users.
Steve Anderson. I'm the manager of Uncompahgre Valley Water.
And our CWCB representative from the Gunnison Basin.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm Brent Gardner-Smith. I'm a reporter.
And we have our main event.
Oh, really?
Thank you, Mitchell. Come on up.
Are you ready for it?
We're ready for you now.
All
We had
right.
introductions, and thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. And I do have to really recognize and spend just a minute recognizing your new Colorado River Basin main stem rep, former Senator Gail Schwartz, and then again Steve Anderson, just for our Gunnison Basin rep. He's it's nice to have our board members here and getting around the state. That's their job. But it's
They get paid so much for it.
they get paid big money and
Yeah.
lots of glory, and so I thank them for being here, and I'm sure they may have some comments on some of this. I'm hoping we can have more of a dialogue. I have a presentation only because sometimes I need props or prompts, whatever you want to call them, and but I'm hoping that we can have a really good dialogue. We've been in constant communication with the staff of the River District. I'm sure they'd like more communication, but we're really hoping to kick off a very intensive outreach program, and I expect that you'll be seeing more of either me or staff of the CWCB, but I enjoy being here, so hopefully it's me. So probably the issue du jour that everybody wants to talk about and has been focused on is Colorado River drought contingency planning and demand management. I know that's an issue for the River District. I know they've been watching closely, and we've been relying on the expertise of the River District to get to where we are at this point. So I think I wanted to give a little bit of the status of where we are with DCP, talk about demand management, and then talk about some of what's happening intrastate and how we'd love for the River District to be involved, because I don't come anywhere without an ask. And so this is one of those times. So we all know, I'm sure you have seen this or some version of the drought contingency plan documents and agreements. I really want to focus on the right side today, the drought response operations agreement and then the demand management storage agreement. Again, those say agreement, not program. So it's important to recognize that, and I can get into a little bit of why that's really important as we're looking at moving forward. If we said program and we were already starting something, it would be a much more difficult task. We're in the process of talking about things and seeing what's feasible, what's not feasible. So I was updating this presentation last night because things have changed as of today. And so the president has signed the legislation, and so that's a big moment. It went through House and Senate, and a lot of drama had occurred to get to that point, but it actually went through the legislative process fairly quickly. So I believe it was yesterday. I don't know exactly what time, but the president.
He tweeted at approximately 4:12.
Yeah,
I think we got a tweet.
yeah, I saw that.
Was that 4:12 Eastern?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm so glad your director did. No. But I saw the tweet, and thank goodness that Arizona did all the work on that. So moving forward, and there's a lot of words up here, so I'm going to, I actually really want to just have a conversation, but I think people know how we got here. Your staff does a really good job at keeping folks up to date, not only here with the board, but actually across the state. So we really appreciate that. So some of what we still need to look at is there are some ongoing issues with IID, and that's going to rear its head, and so we'll be looking at that as a focus of something that we'll be working on. We expect that we'll get to resolution on those issues, and we'll be able to move forward. So I'm going to skip over some of this because I know you all want to probably talk more about the intrastate piece, since we've got that interstate at least a good point. But some of that demand management storage agreement pulls into what we're doing within the state. And so it's an agreement. Like I said, I'm going to keep pounding that. It's an agreement. It is not a program that is defined through these DCP documents. It's a look at a potential investigation and the ability to store water in Powell. So what that means is we have to look at how we would do that within our state. So we're looking at the investigative piece at this point. So the demand management investigation needs to happen in concert with the upper basin partners. Anything that we do within our state, we have to be able to look at within the other upper basin states, and they need to be okay with how we're looking at demand management here. So some of the big issues that we're looking at for the year is how do we include everyone in those conversations, and what does that look like? So when we talked about demand management, the UCRC had resolutions in both 2014 and 2018 just to explore the feasibility. Way to go, Tom. So the resolutions were there just to explore the feasibility. We're still at that stage of where they're saying, okay, it's okay to explore the feasibility on the 4 upper basins, but now we have to really look at it within our state. So both consistent with UCRC resolutions and Colorado's water plan, we're looking at a temporary voluntary compensated program, or investigation of a program. And this is really to reduce the diversions to conserve water that would be consumptively used. And so the real goal of this is to help avoid any potential need for an involuntary curtailment. So if we can avoid that, I think we're better as a state. About a month ago, I was at a ag meeting on the Front Range, but it had folks it was fruit and vegetable growers, and there was a polling question that was asked that said, if there was a curtailment on the Colorado River, would it affect you? And would it have any effect on you? And the response in the room was 1/3 said no, 1/3 said maybe, and 1/3 said yes. And I had a bit of a freak out, because I said, if there is a curtailment or a call on the Colorado River, everybody in the state will be affected. And that's why we're willing to do this work. That's why we're putting the effort towards it. That's why we're looking at ways to fund it, because it doesn't matter where you are within the state, we will all be affected. And I think that's important to recognize. And I think what that polling question showed to me was that we still needed to do outreach. If there were folks in this state that felt like that wouldn't have an effect on them, we still have some work to do, because in order to get people bought into a potential program or even looking at the investigation, they have to be able to see what the impacts would be to them. So,
Becky, and I think our board does understand that the statewide we'd be impacted by that, any kind of curtailment, that everybody in the state would.
yes.
But one of the things that I think our board has been looking at and grappling with, and our staff, and some of our risk studies that I know you're very familiar with, and we'd be interested in hearing from you the state's perspective on whether or not a demand management pool of 500,000 acre feet will actually really add to the protection of our state from a compact curtailment. It's an awfully expensive program. It's an awfully energy intensive, labor intensive effort. It carries with it lots of risks to our economies throughout the state. The question is, from the state's perspective, hydrologically, is demand management something that will truly help us, and at what time and what place would it help us to have that pool of 500,000?
So thanks for the question, Andy. And so some of that is still yet to be determined. We think that it will at this point, and that's why we're willing to put the amount of effort and energy towards that. But as part of the 2019 scope of work and the investigation, we're really going to have to look in that. Do the costs outweigh the benefits, or what is the benefit of it? And so, again, that's why I keep hounding that we're just looking at this. We're not setting up the program at this point. We're saying, is this worth it? We've seen interest with the System Conservation Pilot Program, and we know that there is an interest in something like this, but what is the real benefit to the state? And so that's part of what we're looking at when we're thinking about the year ahead, and with the work groups that I'll get into, and how folks can be involved in that. But to really say, is this a benefit? And what is the money piece going to look like? Where is that going to come from? This is, with it being temporary, voluntary, and compensated, that compensation piece, a mandatory curtailment would not involve the same kind of compensation. And so, so to be able to have this opportunity to look at that, and maybe that be one of the potential benefits, but where does that money come from? What does it go away from if it's used in this way? And it's important to recognize also that it's a 500,000 acre pool. We're a portion of that. So we're not the whole 500,000 acre feet. And so what does that look like? And that's a pool, so it doesn't fill all in one year. And so that's part of what needs to happen before I can fully answer those questions. We have to talk to the people that are on the ground, that are knowing. Folks like the district and farmers on the ground and all over the state. So we can't just say, we think it works, and now we're done, let's move on. We really have to focus on getting out there, and that's where the scope of work for the next year came from, is to get those answers. So talking a little bit about that outreach, I think it's important to recognize the water plan shifted the way we did work at the state level, especially at CRWCD, in terms of it was a paradigm shift, and that we really had to focus on everything from the grounds up, and that's now our standard protocol of how we do business. And so we are taking that to demand management. So you'll see a lot of the same people. You're going to see folks out and about all the time, similar to the way that we did Colorado's water plan. But per the direction of the board in November and January of 2018, we've been out there starting to talk about this. And really the goal was to identify and evaluate options on how to deal with avoiding an involuntary compact curtailment. And so as we move forward, we're going to continue with the board's direction and continue that outreach. We've been very clearly directed by my board, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, to not do anything in a vacuum and to get out there. And so the scope of work on how we're doing things is with that in mind, with great transparency and outreach. We're going to continue to speak at statewide forums. We're hoping that folks know that we're doing this. The inside the tent really knows what we're doing, but how do we expand that tent? How do we get out beyond that? So we're available. The answer has been yes. I'm saying this is the year of my answer being yes. If we're invited someplace, we're gonna do it. And so we'll be there, and hopefully we're not just there speaking, but hopefully sitting at tables with folks and working on things with pen and paper. So some of what we're considering as we look towards the future, and I'm going to talk about work groups here in just a little bit, but some of what came out of the last about year and a half, and you know that there was a CWCD policy statement as it relates to demand management, but some of what we looked at as we were thinking about not only that policy statement, but our work plan for the future was with all of these considerations in mind. I'm not going to read them because most of them came from you all, to be perfectly honest. And so, I mean, these were things that said, hey, we need to continue to factor these considerations in. One of the ones I did want to focus on, though, is the parity and who benefits and who burdens. And that's been a critical component to anything that we do, is that parity, that it's not on the backs of just farmers or just municipal or just West Slope or just East Slope, that we really look across the board. And there is, we're hoping that if a demand management program were to come out of our work, that it was something that there were benefits that came out of it that were far greater than the burdens. So that's the goal. And the big problem when we talk about considerations is that funding and who funds the program. This could be a big dollar program, as you all know. The policy statement, I'm not going to read it, but I think you guys can. Brent, if you want a copy of this, I'm hoping you have it. But I really want to thank the staff and the district's board, because they were a huge part of this policy statement in terms of how it got developed and the fact that we even have a policy statement is huge, and sometimes we don't always know that that's the right solution, and what comes out of it is that we've realized that this was an important thing for the board to take a stance on, and so I wanted to thank you all for that, and I think we're going to get a better feasibility investigation because of that. With these boundaries set, with those considerations set, I think that's important. So when we're looking at this next year, we talked about reducing use through demand management, but we really feel like it should be called investigating reducing use through a voluntary, temporary, compensated demand management. Still, just investigating. Nothing is, we don't expect to have a program set up at the end of this year. So, so work plan. This is the guts of what we really want to talk about, is how we're looking towards the future. You all will be involved in this in some way, shape, or form. But getting to the work groups and the establishment of those work groups, these work groups were presented to the board at the last board meeting in March. So, and one was added, and I'll get into that. But what those are going to look like, the amount of work they'll involve, we could talk about that too. Some of the timelines, deliverables. Some of that is unknown. We might be building the car a little bit as we drive it, but and some is going to be determined as we learn things through these work groups. So the purpose of this is not to set up a demand management program. I'm going to continue to hound on that. We're not exploring the administrative impacts of a compact curtailment. What we are doing is exploring the variety of issues that Colorado and potentially the upper basin states, we're not saying that enough. Anything that we do has to be something that the other upper basin states can agree to and can actually mirror. The other upper basin states and the lower basin states are watching us, but the other upper basin states are sometimes pointing and laughing at us, but because they're like, "Whoa, Becky, we don't know what you've gotten into. We're not going to be able to do a program like that." Well, you guys have an extensive outreach program, but they're hoping to learn from what we do, so that so they can take it and do something similar in their states. So anything we do, again, it's going to have to be something that they can replicate within the other upper basins.
Becky, just a point on the 4 upper basin states. It is possible, though, that each state could have their own unique demand management setup. I mean, I understand Colorado has often been a leader in how things work in the upper basin, but for instance, if New Mexico wanted to do a non-compensated form of demand management, they could pursue that, which wouldn't stop us from pursuing the voluntary and temporary, correct?
Yes, and they're not exactly, and they are trying to say this politically correctly, so Brent will. They're
Don't worry, he really never records what goes on.
Yeah, I know. They're not necessarily happy of the way that we're looking at it, because they don't always feel like they could do something compensated. And if we're doing something compensated in our state, sometimes that sets a standard. We are not doing anything compensated as of yet, because we're still investigating. If we want a voluntary program, there may have to be some sort of enticement to get people to sign on, and besides the greater good. And so they can do something different, but there will have to be a portion of their portion of filling that pool. So this is the way that we're looking at it, but they still have to approve it and say, okay, yeah, how it gets to POW, how we count it, things like that have to be something that they're okay with. The inner workings of the voluntary and temporary and compensated component can be ours alone. I'm going to get to the work groups because I know that's really what you want to talk about, and then I want to finish this so that we can have just an open discussion. But the proposed work groups at this point are what you see up there: law and policy, monitoring and verification, water rights administration and accounting. We know that's going to be difficult. Environmental considerations, economic considerations, that funding piece. This can be a big price tag. Education and outreach, and then the board added the last one, agricultural impacts. In our last meeting, we had kind of intertwined agricultural impacts through all of them, but the board really felt it necessary to have a very close look at that, and so I fully support that. And so those are the work groups that we're looking at this point. How those are kicked off, we're figuring some of that out. What we've done recently is we've kind of put a call out, and previously we had talked at board meetings, any of the roundtables, and said, reach out if you want to be on one of these work groups. We did a formal reach out with the deadline being, I think today is April 17th.
Yeah, I think your
19th.
memo said
19th. So today's April 17th. You have 2 days to get in your interest, but we're really looking for folks that have a collaborative mindset on this. That the real intention is to sit on a work group that is about finding solutions and potential options, looking at the issues, delving into them, and hopefully coming up with solutions or if there's no solution, that they're able to explain that. But that the intention is not to necessarily be on these work groups to obstruct, but rather to be on these work groups to find a solution. Yeah.
How many people are you looking at per work group?
Thanks for that question. We're looking at them being efficient, and you probably heard Brent Newman say by efficient we mean small. So we're hoping about 10 people per work group at the most. In terms of what it looks like for alternates and things like that, and how that works out, we're still determining them, and some of them might be work group specific. Another piece that we're looking at is really evening the playing field, so that not all the meetings would be in Denver, but it would be a very level playing field. If we had a webinar, there wouldn't be people in the room and then other people attending by webinar. It would be webinar for everybody, in person for everybody, in places across the state. So really trying to focus on making sure there can be good involvement, positive involvement, and equal involvement from all the members of the work group.
From our point of view, it's important that the West Slope have representation on these work groups, and if you have too small a group, everybody wants to be represented, so it's going to be a difficult balance act.
There will be a West Slope representative on every work group. That's just, I don't think we do it that. That's the way we do things at this point. The project management team consists of CWCD, DNR, DWR, and some of that leadership is in Denver, but we see the leadership across the state. And I am not hesitant to use your staff as my own sometimes.
We've offered you an office at our
I'm willing to take you up on this, and I'm actually willing to take you up on this space too, because it's cheaper than other places. So
that is, it is available, really.
I'm not joking. I'm 100% serious. We do like free. And that's a benefit. So you should probably open up your guest rooms, because we'll be coming to stay too.
We won't push on the compensated too much on that aspect.
Well, so that, really, truly, I'm not joking when it comes to that. We will probably be trying to use meeting spaces for folks around the room where they have capability to wire people in, and focusing on that. We're going to be at every Basin Roundtable the way that we have been. We'll be having the Basin Roundtable Summit, where this is going to be a heavy conversation. We're going to be getting out there, and we do expect that folks that are in this room now are going to be members of those work groups and working on this.
Hardy?
Becky, this probably goes without saying, but I just think it's important to make sure this is part of a basic understanding for everyone. When you're talking about demand management and conservation, you are not targeting just agriculture, correct? This is also municipal demand management, it's industrial, it's throughout Colorado, not just West Slope.
Yep, thank you for clarifying that. That's incredibly important. I've mentioned the M&I piece a little bit, but that it's incredibly important that we recognize that this is not on the backs of one side of the divide. That parity comment is not one side of the divide or one group or one interest. That it is across the board, that we're really looking at how do we do this, that no one industry feels all the pain or gets all the benefit. Hopefully we design a program, if this comes to fruition, that is beneficial for folks. And so hopefully that we're going to harp on that a lot, especially knowing that you've said that it's important to make sure that we say that loudly and clearly as much as we can. So I'm going to not go into all of these details. I want to get more into the work group. So you have a couple more days to express interest. We've gotten a significant amount of interest prior to even this call for interest. Folks are passionate about this. Folks want to make sure that that anything that's developed is good for all the people of state of Colorado. So we had gotten significant interest already, but we wanted to make sure that we did something that was similar to how we looked at the water plan, and that it was we had a public call for comment and interest. And so some of your folks are already on our radars for being on work groups, and we're hoping that in the next couple weeks we'll have those finalized, and then be able to run them by the board in our May meeting, and then we'll be able to get started on the work. Some of those work groups may take more significant effort than others. We're expecting a few meetings for each of them over the year, but also we see those people as the network out to the local level, and so they'll be part of the outreach team that goes to the basin roundtables and works with folks on letting people know, works with our existing infrastructure, our existing outreach infrastructure, to let them know what we're coming up with and do the check-ins. Nothing is secret, and we're hoping to work with our press folks to get the word out that way also, to make sure people know what's happening and what's going on. One of the key things is going to be that funding, and I think that work group is probably going to be working extremely hard to figure some of that out, and what the boundaries look like on the financial boundaries look like on a program like this. So,
could you expand a little on the time commitment that you expect out of these work groups?
Don't repeat this, Brent, but we don't know. We know that some are going to take more than others. We know that some of it will be dependent on the group and what they determine. It will not be a minor time commitment. I can tell you that. This is an important issue. It's not something that we're going to just brief over and say, okay, check here, check the boxes. This is going to be something that this is important to your constituents, and that the time spent will be reflective of that. So some may be easier than others. A lot of work has already happened just on the Basin Roundtable. Things like the risk study have a lot of information in it that you folks know about. So some of it may be easier than others, and some may require a significant amount of time. We're going to try to make it as user-friendly as possible, and we're going to try to. We're seen as the staff of these, so when you see CWCD's involvement, it's not to drive the conversation, but it's really to document where the conversation goes, and be able to make sure to remind the folks in those work groups what they've talked about, what they've committed to, what they think is a good idea, to not continue the same conversation, but to really move the conversation forward. So the answer is I don't know. Is that a pretty bad answer?
Director Dr. Fresca.
Well, thank you for that introduction. That was very helpful. As I circulate around my water community, I share with people what I know about demand management, and tell them they're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the future. But I have a lot of difficulty in encapsulating a definition of what is demand management. I wanted to ask, what is the concise definition of demand management that the CWCD is currently operating upon?
I think we should probably have a full, formalized statement on that, but it's really a combination of everything that we've said, what it is, what it isn't, and so there's some definition within this alone, but we may get to a more formal exactly what demand management is, and we can get that out. But really, it's the how do we voluntarily, temporarily, and compensated way of avoiding a compact curtailment.
Yeah, I'm struggling with answering that question with a response to anything other than, well, we're going to pay irrigators to irrigate, and then send that water down to a pool in Lake Powell.
Yep.
But Steve, it's not just irrigators, and that is
Yeah.
really important from our perspective at the river district.
As Marty was pointing out
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
with her question.
And that's incredibly important for us to make sure that we're really clear on. If you're saying that, I want to make sure that we're properly messaging so that one group doesn't feel like it's all on their back, because it's not. It's on the backs of everyone. Just like I said when I opened this up and we talked about who would be impacted if there was a call on the river, everyone would be impacted. And so therefore the solution needs to be on the backs of everyone, not just one group.
Very well said. However, the practicality of it is that given the amount of water that agriculture has control over, the preponderance of any consumptive use water is going to be from irrigators. So I think if CWCB can nail down a pretty concise and accurate definition, that there would be great benefit to that. I also wanted to follow up on CWCB's discussion of what a compact curtailment would look like to everybody statewide. But our board was discussing yesterday that before the upper basin would fall out of compliance with the compact, Lake Powell would drop below the power pool, and those big water intakes on the Glen Canyon Dam would start sucking air. That would happen first. That the upper basin would have to deal with that. The upper basin would probably be dealing with Bureau of Rec over that issue, as opposed to the lower basin beneficiaries of the compact. So is CWCB preparing for that possible eventuality in, God forbid, a continued protracted drought? And what are those preparations? What would that look like? How would that impact the upper basin?
Definitely. So I know you all are very familiar with your risk study, and we have the compact curtailment study happening, and that is looking at just that. We would never want to get to that sucking air point that you talked about in Powell. That damage that happens at that point is something that will be difficult to come back from, and so
It's not acceptable.
it is completely unacceptable. And part of the reason that it's unacceptable, and only just a part, but when you have the damage to that infrastructure, that is something that is going to be on the backs of everyone to replace. But the money that comes from that hydropower funds multiple programs that are across all the states, environmental programs, all types of programs, and so that is something that is completely unacceptable for us to get to, and we know that before it got to that point, it would be ugly, and we're trying to find a way to avoid that. 500,000 is a small piece of that bucket, and this is a way to avoid that.
So you're thinking the Bureau of Rec could draw upon that 500,000 acre foot pool, or have you even discussed it?
So we have discussed it, but there's some how it exactly operates there are some more details to be determined with that to avoid curtailment. I got Peter.
Yeah, Peter, in the DCP documents, there's the two upper basin agreements, the reservoir operations agreement, we used to call it reservoir REOPS or whatever. DROA, yeah, kind of a weird name, acronym. But its stated goal is to prevent Lake Powell from going below minimum power pool. So the releases that get made under those drought conditions from Flaming Gorge primarily, but also the Aspen unit if water's there, go to prop up Lake Powell for one of the stated goals is to prevent Lake Powell going below minimum power pool. The demand management agreement, also one of the DCP documents, is specifically geared towards only prevention of compact curtailment. Now that said, it's going to sit in Lake Powell, 500,000 acre feet in Lake Powell. I think we heard yesterday at this level is 8 feet of elevation. It's going to help a little bit, but it's not going to be used, at least under the current structure of those agreements. It's not going to be specifically used for the purpose of keeping Lake Powell above minimum power pool, but the reservoir reoperations will.
Until those buckets
Are
extinguished.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But if I can add to that, the state's policy, the CWCD's policy, which, by the way, we really very much appreciate the board adopting that and the effort that went into it with our board members representing our sub-basins over here on this side, as well as recognizing the efforts from the board members at the CWCB throughout the state and the staff that the effort that went into that was phenomenal, and we really do appreciate that. I think part of what was exciting to see specifically was the comments, and I'm looking at, for instance, paragraph 3 of the demand management state policy statement within that, and it is very clear that demand management program will only be used for the purposes of compact compliance, not power pool preservation. Yeah. That is to us important because of the costs associated with such a program. While we understand power preservation is important, we are most concerned, obviously, as I think the state should be, about compliance.
Yep.
Power is a subordinate issue. Yeah. And Becky, I'd like to impress upon you the board's expectation that we have a CRWCD rather, a River District staff member on each of these committees. The River District has a unique responsibility and obligation under statute for the protection and conservation of the Colorado River for the people of Colorado, and we represent about 1/3 of the state in terms of geography, and in terms of the water developed within the state, we represent the majority of the actual water developed within the state, and we really expect that we have a River District staff member on each of these committees. It's extremely important on that area.
I can tell you that there are already some that are slated, whether they know it or not, for much of the committees. Now, the final determination of exactly what they look like has not been completed yet, obviously, because the interest goes till the 19th. Yep. But we will definitely be keeping that in mind, and we've already seen interest expressed from multiple staff.
And we also
we've provided a list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's also very important on the Ag Committee that we have significant ag producer representation on that, and it's going to be extremely important to have people who are on the ground and know what really can and can't be done. Not just a bunch of water engineers.
Yeah,
Speaking as a water engineer.
And that is the intention of these work group makeups, that it is the people that know systems operations, so that, not me, but because I don't know how some of these individual operations work, but really when we're talking about agricultural impacts, we need to talk to folks that would be impacted.
And I have a personal concern over the interim operating criteria that we're operating under. That is what has driven us to this point. We are giving away annually 3/4 million acre feet to the lower basin in excess of our obligation. And even last year, under a 35% inflow to Lake Powell, we had a 9.0 release to the lower basin. And this is not sustainable. The interim operating criteria stated that one underlying concept was that it not impair development in the upper basin. Lake Powell, even though our obligation in the lower basin is on 10-year running average, Lake Powell operates on a 25-year, the 602A criteria was designed to recognize that. This, I know you were not at CWCB when those were negotiated, but they're, the negotiation is going to be starting soon, and that is very important that we not allow that to continue.
And thank you for expressing that, because we have a level of urgency as we look towards the renegotiations of those guidelines. And so what I do expect is that anything we learn from this, we get to pull that knowledge into the renegotiations. And so they did the best at that time. I would not speak illy of anyone, but I think that we have an opportunity here, especially over this next year through these work groups, to learn a little bit more and use that knowledge as we look towards the future. And so that's the intention.
Well, and Becky, I think we as staff and our board really look forward to working with you and the team at the AG's office to improve upon, to take the lessons we've learned since the 07 guidelines went into place and improve upon that and work collaboratively with you as the state's team to make sure that we've got our best foot forward in those negotiations.
Thank you, and we appreciate that. If you can't learn from something that wasn't perfect, then we're not doing our job. So that we're hoping to get closer to perfect.
Mr. Treese, yeah.
Becky, quick question. You mentioned that the CWCB board added a work group at the meeting, and I'm just thinking we had originally heard 8, and I don't know the timing. That was after, or is there a new one? How many are there total?
The agricultural impacts one. So there are 8. So you never know. There may be another one that comes out. But that was the one that was added.
Okay, thank you.
And we had gotten word from some of the board members prior to that board meeting. So you might have been hearing the 8 because there was already an expression from the board members that was going to be something that they would ask for publicly.
And we appreciate Steve Anderson's articulate request at your board meeting to add that agricultural board group. So thank you.
He's a pretty amazing board member, that's for sure, and very interested in agriculture. So we're fortunate to have a very diverse board that has an array of focuses, so and expertise. So that's been helpful. So.
Any other comments by board members? Yes.
Becky, thanks for your presentation and what you've said. I have a question on the weather and how to go for demand management. And I just want to back up over the last year or a little bit more. We've been in the upper basin saying the lower basin's overusing. We call it the structural deficit. You're overusing, and you need to curtail your uses. Then as the conversation went forward with drought contingency planning, we kind of fell in with, well, we have to adopt some kind of a plan because we're asking them to adopt some kind of a plan. And also the federal government has said if we don't, we'll develop something. So then when it comes to where we are today with the weather, not so much the how, but weather, is there a nexus between the lower basin, which has adopted a plan, with the exception of Imperial at least, that if we don't do demand management, put in our DCPs, then that will mean that the lower basin will say, fine, if you're not going to do your plan, we're not going to do ours. And so the whole thing goes that they don't indeed curtail their structural deficits. So is that all of, I hope I said it in the sequence, that means that maybe we may be forced to do that?
So one of the things that's important to recognize with the DCP is that it was a plan for the upper basin and actions set in place for the lower basin. And so, one of the benefits was that there was a recognition of the lower basin's use, and there was a need for immediate changes, and then there was a need for us to be able to begin the process of starting to look. So it is a plan for the upper basin. It is actions in the lower basin at this point. So that's important to recognize, and that was why the DCP was so important to not only Colorado but all the other upper basin states. We needed to see what's going to happen on the lower basin side and use that as we look towards the future.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Munger, and then Mr. Trampy.
So, and I, first off, so being in local government as long as I've been, and so we have individuals that'll sandbag the process. So, and again, I'm just wanting to know how we're gonna, so if you're not at the table, they'll come back at a later point in time and say, well, I wasn't in the process, nobody invited me, you know, so I just throw that out. And my second question is, we talked about just a moment yesterday, and I had a similar problem with the Swazi as well, is that we're creating silos and making sure that there's communication between the silos. And Alden brought that up, but I want to make sure that those groups are interacting, so that when we get done, each of them haven't built their own silo that we can communicate back and forth to each other. So, and again, I commend you for what you're doing, and again, so you know we're going to be wanting to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and we'll go from there.
Thank you for that comment. I want to make sure that I address that these work groups are just a piece of it. So yes, they're going to be designed, and part of the overlap with staff is so that we don't build new silos. But the work groups are a component of the bigger picture. So just if you weren't on a work group, that doesn't mean that you can't be involved. There are other opportunities to be involved, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth. We'll be using your annual meetings as a messaging. You better be using them because you'll be on the work groups, and so you need to be letting your constituents know what's happening. So we're hoping with the amount of outreach that we're doing that when folks come in and say, "Oh, I wasn't invited," that the folks that know will know that everyone was invited, and there are multiple opportunities to be a part of the solution. So.
Mr. Trampy.
My question is going to be a little bit different. When I look around the state of Colorado, we have so much agriculture going out for a variety of reasons, and I won't try to voice any or all of them. But as that's happening, is there a plan or an idea that maybe we look at a no alternative situation? And are you going to try to analyze that potential in relation to the good and bad of having a demand management program versus no demand management program? Are we going to try to compare those?
Thank you, Director Trampy, for that question. And the answer to that is, of course, yes. If this is something that is just not feasible, then a no answer is okay also. That we don't have to do this. There's nothing set in stone. There's only an agreement that says we could do this. If as a state we determine that a demand management program doesn't work for us, we don't have to do anything. Agriculture is important to the state, and we don't want to create a program that that would put that at risk in any way, shape, or form. You know my background enough to know that I've been passionate about keeping agriculture in production. It's important to our state, to our security. I always say if we're going out for food to other countries or other states, there's a security issue there, and it is part of who we are as a state. And that was stated in Colorado's water plan. A big component of why we moved forward with that was to do what we could to preserve ag. We are not going to overstep on local control. That's not the intention. And so how do we keep people in agriculture is definitely a driving force for my daily work.
Mr. Vanderbrink.
I had something that I kind of wanted to tail on with Doug, what he said as well, is we've had issues before where state interagencies had some conflicts to where there was a communication going on
What?
between them, yes. It happens even with the small.
Yeah.
It happens all over the place, so I'm not trying to single out you guys. But is that gonna be part of the process to prevent that silo effect, not even from happening within the committees, but also within the state, and I see that, so. But I think that needs to be assured that if those agencies agree and have input with what the CWCB is putting forward, so that you can have a fully successful plan.
Yeah, that is definitely something that we recognize as an issue, or has been an issue. Part of Colorado's water plan was to break that down and open lines of communication. We have some examples of where we're doing that on an interagency level. Part of the structure of the proposed project management side of things is so that we have involvement from interested agencies. There's still additional involvement and awareness that'll probably need to happen, but we are going to do our best to avoid that. There's things that happen. If you're in government, you know that oftentimes that occurs. We're aware of it, and I think that's the first step, and we're going to try to make sure that DWR is at the table, AG's office is at the table, CWCB is at the table, CPW is in some way, shape, or form at the table, and aware of what's going on. The benefit with Dan Gibbs as the new director of DNR is he has a lot of connections and interests, and he is really pulling that executive level team together, and so in a way that I think is unprecedented, and how he's looking at who he puts in places is to keep those lines of communication open. So I am optimistic that we will have less issues than you have seen in the past.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's been very informative. We've gone very overly long, but it's very important to cover this. This is one of the most critical things we're going to be doing in the next few years. So appreciate you coming over to meet with us, Becky, and we will be seeing a lot more of you, and our staff will be seeing even more of you, I'm sure. So just keep in touch.
I can make regular appearances.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Fortunately, it's just quarterly, so.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Treese. Have you solved Brexit yet? Or?
Good morning. Well, come on, DCP to one, now Brexit.
Yeah.
So I want Zane to join me, and we're going to start with a contract request.
Actually, the contract
We
request
did-
is the last
we did that?
item.
We did that.
It was
So we- yeah, I'll do that when we get to federal.
Our contract is the last item, so.
Yeah. President Merritt, I do want to see if you wanted to ask for introductions from some recent folks that have joined us.
That might be good, yeah.
Some that you probably don't know.
We have had a number of folks, one who I know is standing up there because he can't find a seat or whatever, that is a stranger to this area. The folks that have come in since, I embarrassed everybody by asking them to introduce themselves. Could they please? Yes, sir.
My name is Roger Day, just a local citizen interested in water.
Very important, thank you. Anybody else that's come in?
Eric Kuhn, I just came in to say hi to Becky.
Okay, you just a local citizen?
Pat O'Toole, I'm an irrigator on Noble Snake River.
Thank you, Pat.
He'd like to be an irrigator, but it's snowing up there.
You can't irrigate now, so, okay. I think that's it. Yep. The Family Farm Alliance, right, Pat?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for being here. So I think we've got everybody that has managed to make their way in. So thank you, Chris.
I want to turn it over to Zane.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, members of the board. We have one bill at the state capitol that I am putting in front of you for your position this morning. I emailed that out yesterday. We had expected to see at least one other, but as of now, it has not been introduced. So in front of you is House Bill 19-1259, the Species Conservation Trust Fund Project bill. This is an important bill for a variety of reasons, including funding for the native fish recovery programs. In the past, it has been used by district staff for selenium control funding. My recommended position here is support. I don't see anything controversial about this. Do we want to ask for Sonia to? Before you make a motion on the bill, I did want to ask Sonia just to speak briefly to the selenium control funding that has been utilized in the past is not specifically spelled into this year's appropriation. So.
Yeah, so the Species Conservation Trust Fund has been a pot of funding that we've used since the 2011 PBO was drafted with the selenium management program. To date, and under Steve Miller, we had used it for many years on doing scientific studies or filling in that gap regarding our knowledge on selenium. I think my one recommendation would be last year or this year we didn't have any money in Species Conservation Trust Fund, but we do have many projects going forward that need both technical assistance funding or financial assistance funding. And we do have ongoing selenium science studies that we would like to continue to be able to tap into this funding source. It's been critical to filling some of those gaps in our knowledge. So.
And this will authorize, not appropriate $5 million a year for the next 4 fiscal years. So, assuming that there is money available, we'll hopefully be able to draw that in and appropriate it towards selenium control in the future.
Okay.
As much as we can get would be great. Typically, we've only had about $500,000 per year dedicated to it. So, I think continue to put some pressure and get some money from it would be great. Yes, Peter.
I had a couple of questions. I didn't mean to interrupt. The Colorado River, Upper Colorado River Fish Recovery Program had a funding scare last year, or I guess last year.
Federal.
Federal funding scare. The bill appropriates $200,000 of state money for that. The amount appropriated for the Platte River endangered fish is tenfold that. It's almost close to $2 million. And given that funding scare, which has been cured, I think, at least temporarily, what is there any adverse precedent set in the respective amounts allocated to Colorado River versus Platte?
Chris? I don't think so, and I think this is largely a federal issue. The Colorado, Upper Colorado and San Juan River recovery programs were reauthorized. They still need appropriations, and so we'll be working on that. The South Platte River Recovery Program has not been reauthorized and has legislation just introduced to reauthorize the Platte River, both North Platte and South Platte. Those are in process. As far as the any concern about a relative statement based on the different appropriations at the state level, I don't think there's an adverse precedent. I don't think there's a concern. The South Platte River is in a very different position in terms of its commitment. The Upper Colorado River Program has largely it has met, the states have met collectively. The states have met their percentage obligation to the recovery program. And so the requirement for continued state appropriations is significantly less on the Colorado than it is on the Platte.
Ms. Chandler Henry?
Hi, David, is this connected to the aquatic nuisance species funding? Is that a different pot?
That is a different pot. This does not include ANS funding. In the past, it has appropriated dollars to non-native fish control. There is nothing spelled out in this year's appropriation for that, but it, again, would authorize if the director of the Department of Natural Resources wanted to in future years has the authority to put money towards non-native fish control.
And just one additional clarification, I think it is that under the recovery program, they don't recognize water quality impacts to the endangered river fish and don't provide funding or money under that.
Yep.
So the Species Conservation Trust Fund is a great local or state source that allows us to tap into and address the water quality or Clean Water Act issues. So, and that tie with endangered species.
frankly, I continue to be amazed at what you guys have done with the selenium issue in the Gunnison Uncompahgre.
We've had great success. Yep.
In
It's
the
been
past,
a
what, 20
good program.
plus years, there's been enormous improvement there. Appreciate that work. Any other questions? Oh, Peter?
You know what the $300,000 for ESA litigation is going for?
I do not. That was actually a question I had for you and Jason this morning, and do not. So, yeah, it's specifically spelled out in there.
Is Becky still here?
No, she's out being interviewed, yes.
Move support.
Okay, motion support by Mr. Alvey, second by Ed Vanderbrink. Any further discussion?
I just want to add, we've been using the Endangered Species Trust Fund for several projects on the White River as we're developing the PBO and the White River Management Plan. It's been a very beneficial program, and I'm very supportive to keeping that thing moving forward. So we've got some fish over there that need to be protected, and you guys know I'm a fish guy, so any chance I can throw something in there for that fish, I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
Just as long as you don't talk about catching them again at a public
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Any other issues? What's next?
That's all I have on state affairs. I mean, the
that's
updates
amazing.
that I provided by email last night should suffice. You're aware of the residential assessment rate.
Yep.
Final.
You did a good job on that.
Yeah, thank you. As well as we've discussed briefly the sports betting issue. We don't have a lot of clarity on that right now. We need to circle the wagons and figure out where we're at. That's all that I have on that at this
It
point.
might make sense to give the board at least the opportunity on the sports betting. So give a quick status report and, just give them an opportunity to express support or concerns or specific areas of interest.
I will be brief. There is the opportunity, I want to keep expectations low. There's the opportunity that we may be able to fund part of the Colorado Water Plan and include it as the water plan as the primary beneficiary of a bill that could potentially send something to the voters to legalize sports betting in the state. We don't know what platform that'll take, whether it's in-house limited gaming only, or whether it's on an online platform. That could affect the total pot of money significantly. Beyond that, I can say that there are a handful of NGOs, other water interests that are working on this. We don't have final language at this point. I really am hesitant to ask for conceptual support on something without knowing exactly where we are in the language. So
we'll probably have opportunity for one more conference call on this, unless things that
correct.
Unless it happens on the night before the.
It could be introduced in 5 minutes. I have honestly no idea.
Yes, sir, Mr. Albee. Yeah.
Would this be done by the legislature, their action, or is this a referendum?
It would be a referred measure to the voters.
From the legislature.
And that's one of the appealing qualities of water, is that it's the water plan is apolitical, it has broad support in every corner of the state. Ultimately, if we see a good opportunity to fund the water plan, we're going to jump on it. We just don't have the details of it.
Okay.
Andy and Zane have been really instrumental in securing this. The early talk was that the water plan or water funding would receive no more than 1/6 of a divided pie. But they have, the talk now is that it may all be dedicated. No guarantees still, Zane's caution. But really, they've made tremendous progress. In the conversation, by the way, Representative Catlin called me last night just as I was leaving dinner and asked me about, the feelings.
Becky, before you walk out the door.
Oh.
I'm leaving my stuff, so.
Okay, we did have a question come up about Peter, you want to ask that question, or?
Well, we just talked about the Endangered Species Act.
Species Conservation Trust Fund.
There was $300,000 allocated toward litigation, and we just wondered what was that going to?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
On exact details.
Okay, thank you, yep. Sorry, Chris.
No, just, we made tremendous progress, but it has moved. Director Catlin asked to send his regrets as well as his regards. But he was asking, what's the feeling of the district on monies going to the water plan? I told him generally that, we're very favorable. We think the progress that's been made is substantial and encouraging. He did indicate that within the House Minority Caucus, that it is looking positive, and it has the support of leadership.
We've spoken with the majority leader, and ultimately there is broad support for the concept. I, again, am hesitant without knowing what the language actually says. So.
Well, I might have to buy you a six-pack come May, so we'll see what happens.
Deal.
Okay.
And the last thing we should discuss on state affairs, yes. You just mentioned it, Mr. President, the May 2nd is your next scheduled meeting, telephone meeting. That's the day before, that's roughly 24 hours before the end of the legislative session. I would suggest that it's too late then to do anything, so there's no reason for us to burden your time. Providing you that update, we can do that electronically.
Would there be any need for one next Thursday?
If you wish, we will.
Well, if anything's
we will have to have. This will be out,
yeah.
But that's why I wanted to give you an opportunity to provide direction. There will be at least one more bill,
yep.
Water bill. So it's up to you all if you wish to.
You might look at tentatively scheduling that for next Thursday.
We can put something on the calendar in case this bill is introduced.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on state affairs to Zane or Chris? Okay.
Well, thank you. Dave, if you'll stay here, some federal issues, and as we've already seen, the federal issues do have direct ties to state issues, legislative and administrative. Just to highlight some of the updates, a few updates that have occurred since my memo. Of course, the DCP has passed, and it passed in record time, and we now know that it's been signed by the president. We also know that Imperial Irrigation District yesterday Monday sent a letter to the Metropolitan District that they intend to sue them on the implementation of DCP. So some things never end. Another development last week that most of you are probably aware of, having read the papers, that former Congressman McGinnis intern, former associate to rifle lawyer Russell George, and former high school student of Amy Trees, David Bernhardt, was confirmed as the new Secretary of the Interior. Also, I'll get into an update that was in my memo. The Land and Water Conservation Fund, which this board has discussed and expressed support for and directed our involvement in, was reauthorized and provided permanent reauthorization, but not full or permanent funding. Senator Gardner and Senator Manchin have introduced a bill to fully fund or provide essentially full funding, $900 million annually for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I also, having mentioned Senator Gardner's leadership in the Land and Water Conservation Fund most recently, as well as historically, I want to recognize and let you know, Alyssa, give you a heads up that I may be calling on you, but I also want to recognize your presence and thank you for coming up here from Senator Bennett's office. I just wanted to make sure that Betsy Bayer from Senator Gardner's office said she was going to try and make it up here, and I just want to spin around to make sure see if she's there.
Do we want to take 60 seconds for staff to report?
Alyssa, do you have anything you'd like to report from the senator?
That was a good overview of kind of where we're at. I mostly just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here and introduce myself. I know it's usually John Whitney that's in this position from our office. I'm a new staffer from the Grand Junction office for Senator Bennett, so I'll be here if you have any. This is not my area of expertise, so if you have any technical questions, I'm happy to take them back to the team and get back to you as soon as I can.
Alyssa, would you also introduce through the board Matt, your associate who's up in Steamboat, whose last name I never remember?
Kerker. It has too many vowels, but it's Kerker, Matt Kerker. He is based out of Steamboat, but he's the Central Mountains. So he'll be covering most of the I-70 corridor up to Garfield County. Garfield County will be with the Grand Junction office up into Moffett and Rio Blanco as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to have you here. Mr. Gardner and Mr. Bennett have also introduced a bill to reauthorize the South Platte Recovery Program, or the Platte River Recovery Program, which we just talked about. And just to highlight some of the activities that are in my memo, but I think are worthy of mention and an invitation for any discussion or follow-up questions or directions to staff. The CORE Act has been introduced by Senator Bennett. The CORE Act is a central, it has both the San Juan and central Colorado headwaters wilderness areas, as well as a new designation, a national historic landscape, thank you, for the Camp Hale area. The wilderness areas that are included in the CORE Act, we have been involved in and working on the water rights and water rights language, the designations of those areas, both in Ouray County as well as Eagle and Summit counties, and are satisfied that there's no problem, and you have given sufficient direction in the past regarding those areas and the water interests in those areas. Very significantly, there was a bipartisan public lands package, sort of the omnibus bill that was expected at the end of the last Congress, in fact, passed at the beginning of this Congress, and encouragingly, Bolt's Ditch access after 4 Congresses finally got through the process and signed into law.
That's a good win for a little town.
And a tiny issue, yeah, really. Yeah, can't be described with the word landscape.
No.
San Juan and Upper Colorado River recovery programs were reauthorized, permanent reauthorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. There were also nationwide, there were all sorts of lands and miles of wild and scenic rivers. The only one I will mention that Senator Gardner's office was particularly helpful in working on a designation, working on language surrounding a designation of the Green River in Wyoming, but ensuring that the designation of wild and scenic for a segment of the Green River would have no effect on DCP and specifically on extended operations from Flaming Gorge for by that stretch of the river.
Is that above?
I suspect T. Wright knows everything.
Is that above Flaming Gorge, Chris, or?
Below.
Oh, it's below Flaming Gorge,
Yeah.
okay, but still in Wyoming, so, okay.
Infrastructure is now the sort of the new hot topic. Still not clear where the administration is coming from, but the Congress really is no longer waiting on the administration to provide leadership or suggestion. There's lots of discussion and a number of bills looking at infrastructure and funding infrastructure. Encouragingly, through past efforts nationwide, water is included in the conversation for infrastructure, water and wastewater, as is aging infrastructure in that conversation, not just new or rehabilitated roads or airports and other more nationally recognized infrastructure. I think that's it for really highlights. I mean, the only waters of the U.S. we've already discussed. The only other item I wanted to mention was to make sure that this board is aware that there is a new Colorado Forest and Water Advocacy Alliance that has been formed by the Colorado Water Congress, Club 20 representing the rural Colorado at large, not just the West Slope counties. And by virtue of my service as co-chair along with Director Whitmore as chair of the Water Committee for Club 20, I'm involved for Club 20 in that alliance. So it's the Colorado Water Congress, the Club 20, the Nature Conservancy, the Colorado Forest Products Association, and essentially the Front Range Water Council, going by another name, but the exact same membership. You all know them as the Front Range Water Council. And that has been meeting and getting its name out, developing an action plan to begin efforts and advocacy for projects and programs that jointly benefit forest health and watershed health. And there's some legislation out there as well that should prove to be productive vehicles if we can get them moving. So I wanted to offer then now the board's opportunity for questions or comment or direction as always.
Comments, anybody? Karen,
That was a perfect segue, Chris. I will send you materials on what we're working on in Summit County with Forest Service and changing fire ban criteria, because the last 2 years we've had our major fires blow up while we were literally in our commissioner meeting talking about should we have a fire ban. And so clearly the criteria we're using is not working. And so we're really pushing the idea that it probably should be forest by forest in how these are determined, the criteria that's used, because we're a little different from North Carolina and Oregon and maybe even forests in Colorado. And what they've used is 90% ERC, energy release component, which is basically fuel moisture. And we're saying that's, one, not adequate. It really, we're going to be looking at 75%, not 90%, which is after the fires have already broken out. And then we're also looking at using the criteria of resource availability, both locally and nationally, as well as social factors. For us, it's a big deal to have another 100,000 people in the county on 4th of July, and the complications of having fires during those periods of time. So anyway, we're looking at, so I have this carefully charted out, and I'll send you the material.
Thank you.
And the Forest Service generally has said, well, Scott Fitzwilliams is very on board, our local people are very on board, but at the federal level, you know, we know what we're doing, and we've been doing it this way forever, and it works. And so I think this is a great opportunity for that group to look at this, as well as we've talked with federal reps about it as well. So I'll give you all that material.
Thank you. We are working on, that has not been on the agenda, but we have been discussing controlled burns and the state's current lack of liability protection for controlled burns after the fire on the Front Range, which name I can't remember. But I think that's yes, Mr. Munger. Yeah.
So I did follow up on the wildland fire thing, and then the interaction with water and the rest. The State Forest Service and emergency managers are going to have a state wildland fire mitigation conference in Steamboat Springs on May 10th and 11th for public officials as well as for landowners. So, we'd welcome you there.
Yeah, we'll try to have somebody there. Yep. Other comments? No? Okay, thank you. We have a contract item.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Alicia to come up here and join me for this contract request. This is tied. I guess first and foremost, I want to thank Alicia, who has been helping out on the external affairs team with not only these contracts, but with a lot of the broader vision planning and project management side of things. And she's been an incredible assistance in many ways to all of us on the team. So thank you, Alicia. In front of you is one memo requesting approval on 2 contracts These contracts are closely tied to the conversations we had in January around the district's information and outreach efforts for the year. The first contract is with HCB Design, intended to help us with our multimedia marketing planning, design, and execution. HBZ is not a traditional ad agency per se, but they have experience in those areas, as well as from the graphic design all the way up to the ad planning and implementation. We have met with how many total? Six potential contractors on this. HBZ came in with the staff's, it was our feeling that it was the best, most robust, and most affordable contract option for us. So the second is with Vital Films, a proposal to help us update and implement and kind of re-energize our video marketing efforts. That's not only kind of our 5-minute educational film product, but also shorter snippets for online use in order to, I guess, cater to the general public's limited attention. So, but
What, 5 seconds? Or?
Vital is a Roaring Fork-based film production company, well-reviewed, came highly recommended, and we're recommending approval on both contracts. Anything I'm missing, Alicia?
HVC and Vital have worked together.
Right, they have.
Okay, so do we have any questions of staff on this? So we have 2 motions necessary. The first is a approval for the general manager agreement not to exceed $35,000 with HCV Designs. Do I hear a motion for that?
Move approval.
Motion by Trampy.
Second.
A second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Second action is board approval for general manager agreement for $30,000 up to $30,000 for Vital Films. You have a motion? Motion by Hazard.
Second.
Second by Munger. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay.
Thank you, directors.
We've got directors' concerns and basic concerns now, and I think maybe we'll just start at the bottom of the table there with Mr. Munger and go around if you have any comments or concerns at this point.
I don't have anything intelligent to say this morning.
So what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, well, yeah. Never stopped me, so. Okay, thank you. Mr. Acapresca.
Well, I had in my notes, I wanted to share with the board something that I actually touched on yesterday, and that's the fact that in Mesa County, I'm struggling with a water community that is very much split on the topic of demand management. And outside the water community, there just isn't a lot of knowledge or literacy about it at all. So that, that makes for a real challenge for Mesa County's representative to this board, but one that I'm cognizant of and one that I can probably not resolve entirely by myself, but it's something I'm focused on constantly.
Okay, well, keep up the good work, because it's going to be important to get that resolution and convergence.
And Steve,
Yeah.
as you have, please let us know where we can be of assistance.
I will, thank you.
Thank you. Director Stegelmeyer.
I did want to bring up what I just brought up, and I think it's something we feel strongly about, and ties back to money that the county has to pay for fires that are actually all on national forest land. So, and we're spending federal money is record amounts, while we don't have the money on the ground to do the prevention work that needs to be done. So I just think it's an important federal issue for us to keep pounding on. We need prevention money, not just after the fact money, and we also need to be more conservative about fire bans.
Yep. Mr. Albee.
Just an update for the board or make you aware of a problem we have in Delta County that we're going to ask the River District to help on. We've had a ditch slide out. It's a small ditch that doesn't have access to many funds and needs to get something done in an emergency fashion to repair their ditch. It's a Pilot Rock ditch, serves the Crawford area. In the past, the River District has authorized some help for emergency situations like this. There's not time for them to do too many other things other than get started on fixing this problem. It shouldn't be a huge amount of money within the general manager's authority. I just wanted to make the board aware of that and hear any thoughts that you might have.
Okay. Trampy.
Are there thoughts on?
Well,
I wouldn't mind
okay
a
with
little
this
bit of
kind of-
direction from the board
Okay.
on that, or input. So,
Well, yeah,
When you say not a big project, give us.
be looking.
They're estimating about a $56,000 repair at this point, and sort of highlights something that I think goes beyond this immediate problem the board might think about. The state has a loan fund, but it's traditionally geared more for large projects. In their criteria, they indicate that it's for over $100,000 loans. So there's this kind of a gap where there aren't really any programs very available that can help out water companies that have an immediate need. And I don't think that the ask would be for the River District to fund the entire project, obviously, but some help on the $20,000 range, $25,000, which is within the general manager's discretion. And there would be a certain, we need more details. It's just happened, and clearly we'd have to look into it to be sure that it's a reasonable request and well designed. But that's the
What is the time frame this be at?
quick as possible. They're going to have to start working
Yesterday.
ideally, yeah. I mean,
Yesterday,
the water season is upon us, and this is a small ditch company that runs maybe 16 to 18 CFS through their ditch. Don't have storage water. They're strictly dependent on decree flows and don't want to miss out.
Is it season-long water or early water?
Well, it's decree water, so it does run out. Last year, they were out by the end of June. In a normal year, they'd run in August, mainly for hay and pasture land.
Mr. Trampy, some thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall exactly what we did, whether we did it informally or we just kind of said we weren't going to have these emergency situations, and we weren't going to deal with these emergency situations, that they could come back on the grant program later or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what our policy, or if we really had a policy, but I know we changed and were not in favor of funding all these emergency things without some time frame to evaluate or something. I don't remember exactly. It's been a number of years ago. I'm struggling.
The one that I remember was the East Mesa ditch up here on the Crystal.
Like Arbor,
That's most recent. And we did authorize some emergency repairs for them, as I recall. Of course, the grant program would have been helpful, but it's not with us.
It wouldn't have been
Yeah, I know,
wouldn't
I
have-
know.
So we have a problem without a policy.
Yeah.
Peter, do you have any comments on that?
No, I don't recall specifically that we, in the discussion about suspending the grant program for this calendar, this fiscal period, that we made any determination pro or con against the funding emergency situations. We have done emergency funding in the past. That was during the period when we did have the grant program. We had the Maybell head gate. It was pretty significant. That was a pretty significant project. I can't remember the dollar figure on that one, but we did contribute to that.
That wasn't an emergency, was it?
Well, I can't say if it was emergency, but it was
Was
get
it
it
within
back.
the grant program?
No, I think we did it separately.
Oh,
But in any case, I don't think we made a formal statement one way or the other, which I assume means you still have that discretion, whether it's something that is discouraged or not is, within the board's purview.
Thoughts out of the board members on this?
well, just, I don't have, probably I'm like Doug, I don't know if I have anything intelligent to say about this, but other than, I think in our basin, the Roundtables grant program, and I know that's lengthy, but we have the ability to retroactively do some things. And I guess I'd like to see if, I would like to see some assistance some way, but I would like to make sure that it's just not us and that there's the local, whether it's conservation districts or whoever, the Roundtable is involved as well.
I think their intent is to go to the roundtable to ask for some grant money to help with this. It's the time frame, and there are some restrictions on retroactive spending with
State funds.
WSRF
State funds,
grants.
Yeah.
You got a picture,
Oh.
video aid.
Wow.
This is where the ditch came down.
Huh.
It's a wet year, we see these problems, and we have to.
This was upstream of the, downstream of the Needle Rock Ditch piping project that we're doing under the RCPP program. And I hesitate to say it, I don't know if we could under our RCPP, the PL 566 funds and emergency basis. Not sure, but Clint will be here this afternoon. I think it's worth asking.
Well, my inclination, and if the board disagrees with it, I'd be happy to hear it, is that assisting water users, for many of our water users, $56,000 in the Grand Valley Ditch would Water User Association of the Uncompahgre would not be a significant burden, but for a small ditch company like this, assisting our ditch users who don't have other water users who don't have other alternatives is something that I think the River District should be doing, and I certainly will make sure that they have skin in the game and are helping pay for their own issues. But I'd like to be able to have staff look at it and figure out a way to help the situation.
And it looks like we may have a conference call scheduled next Thursday.
Yeah, I wouldn't think we need to go beyond your delegated authorities.
Just delegated authorities.
Yeah, it's really, it's not I don't think we're not looking for a board action. It just is really an opportunity to weigh in. And Tom had mentioned this to me before, and he told me he was going to be bringing it up. I think it's I think it's important that we help our water users in the agricultural world stay in business. And,
Ms. Whitmore.
I think this is a good example of some of the things we talked about yesterday and some of the reason that we really need to be in a position to do more to help our constituents with development as well as emergencies and moving forward. I think we were all kind of a mind that we need to make that a priority for the district.
Do we have a motion to direct staff to work with?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Whitmore and a second by Akra-Fresca. Any further discussion on this?
So I just have one comment, and again, the picture tells 1,000 words. And again, I'm always concerned about emergencies.
Right.
The emergency with the lack of planning and the lack of due diligence and the owners and the rest, including ourselves, when we run on our ditches and the rest. So I'm always concerned about, well, who caused the emergency? So this looks like it's a pretty Mother Nature caused emergency. And so I'm supportive of the direction we're heading here. That we shouldn't be rewarding bad management as well. So,
agree.
Mr. Akra-Fresca.
Well, as I second the motion, I also feel obligated to say that in the very near future, this board should probably develop an emergency
Yeah.
request policy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what we have is somewhat an ad hoc grant program for the grant
Yeah.
program that we have already deferred.
And in fact, our grant program really came out of constant requests from Mr. Fetcher years ago.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
John was always good at whining for more money, but John was great at that. But we responded to our grant program that way. So I think that's,
If we could have that discussion on a future agenda, Mr. President, that would be great.
And I'm not sure about the local snowpack, but the Gunnison Basin snowpack as of today was 148%. So I'm not sure where that was, but generally that was 148% of the Gunnison Basin. So, yes, ma'am.
I just started to tag on to what Marty said. I think it's if Andy, you decide to go with this, it's a good opportunity for us to tell us a story about the relevancy of the river district. So people start to see the role of the bigger role of the river district that we may be coming before them to ask for help in the future.
Okay.
Ones that doesn't snowball.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my problem.
Yeah, good point.
How do you sort one from the other?
Yeah.
You
There's
know,
always
this-
a good-
This is
good
number
request,
one.
yeah.
This is number one. What if we get 6 more tomorrow? You know,
Right.
how much can we do? And where do we make the decision of who gets the carrot and who gets the stick?
Yep.
That's what bothers me, okay?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We have a motion and a second for direct staff to work with the Director Alvey and with the irrigators out there to see what can and should be done and giving it within the manager's authority. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, Mr. Trampy, Director's concerns.
It's not really a concern. I think I just need to make you aware of things that are going on in the Gunnison. There's a gal that's an intern up at Gunnison for, I don't know whether it's a spring break or spring semester or 6 months in the spring or something. But anyway, she's a student in the Masters in Environmental Management program at Western. And she put together a group, I think there's 6 of them. And they're going to figure out a demand management program for the Gunnison Basin.
What?
Oh, good.
And they interviewed me Saturday, and I was, they've got their document partially done. It was due this next week as far as meeting their requirements for their master's program. But it was very obvious that their target is agriculture. And they flat say that agriculture is going to keep the environment strong through all and the recreation community strong through all the demand management programs. And we have, they're going to do it with efficiencies and all these kinds of things. And just, it helps me, it showed me that all the things that we've been talking about as far as ag use, they have no understanding of. They thought they made us put on all the sprinklers and all the gated pipe and all that kind of stuff, that we'd be solving the consumptive use requirement. And when I got done with them, they were thoroughly confused. I just tried to explain to them the realities of irrigating in a high mountain country.
So get them up with a shovel, or?
And they had no concept. But they're very sincere about trying to help the community, and help the state of Colorado. But they're off in another world. I just hope we don't have that happening everywhere.
If you can, the cloud seeding. If you can offer, if you happen to have contact information, I think staff would be happy to reach out to reinforce your messages.
Maybe you can offer an internship at the Trampy Ranch with a shovel.
Yeah, that wouldn't go over very well, probably.
But this does illustrate the problem that we have with people not understanding agricultural water use. You can tell them over and over again, but I don't know if you made any headway with it.
I have no idea.
And it's
I don't know what they're final document back to their
We need a solution, and
master's
maybe
committee
it's
is gonna be.
through the outreach, whatever we can do, but it is not going away as a problem.
Dr. Feskin.
Well, I have another example. In my work on the roundtable, a proposal came across my screen from the city of Aspen. The city had issued an RFP for a professional organization to help the city develop a demand management program.
Okay. I'm not gonna do much up there. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Gonna roll down to the bottom of the table on that side. Mr. Gray, Director's Concerns, Basic Concerns.
I don't think I have any.
Mr. Vanderbrink.
I don't have any concern, just a few things to update.
Okay,
I can't talk about my fishing secrets anymore. In January.
How do the ponytail chub taste?
Well, they used to have an actual pike minnow processing factory in Grand Junction there for quite a few years. So apparently they taste pretty good. I can't speak from experience, but in January, the White River Conservation District held a water forum that was well attended. There was, I think, 140 people roughly there. And for the White River, that's pretty substantial.
That's most of the population.
Yeah, and we had some wonderful speakers. Andy was one. Peter was as well. We talked DCP, demand management, water law. There was a Colorado River District update. There was discussions about basin studies, and then there was an updated report from the White River Conservation District. I might have missed one or two in there, but lots of good dialogue from the audience that was there as well. Good Q&A sessions. I was thoroughly pleased to see that engagement coming from our community. So, to kind of follow up on that, there was more folks that were really wanting to hear more about Colorado water law. And we've been doing a very concerted effort to educate the folks within Rio Blanco County and the White River drainage on Colorado water laws and, you know, what you have to do to stay in the compliance and how it applies to you. So they have 2 sessions. I sent out a text. I kind of forgot about that. I sent out a text to the facilitator for that. But they have Aaron Clay coming in. I guess he's from Delta. And they're doing a session in Meeker, and then they're going to do a session in Rangeley as well. And it's going to be limited, and there's going to be a fee associated with that because his service is free, of course. But I'm going to be attending, and I would encourage if there's others of interest to please share that around. I don't know when the flyer comes out, but I'll make sure I share that with your staff as well. Then in January as well, the algae group that we have for the White River, we've gotten our first preliminary round of information back after 1 year of studies. And we've got 3 items that really have started to kind of flag out. And Hunter participates in this quite a bit. I don't see him today. So.
He's actually examining, on his way to examine our new main gate at Wolford. He's going to the factory to hopefully spur some more action on it.
Good for him.
Okay, good.
But we did a significant data mine, and USGS is kind of leading that charge, but the River District is participating in that study there to figure out what's going on. And we found increases in phosphorus and increases in temperature, and we had a landowner come in and gave a presentation, and there's been significant changes to the geomorphology of the White River up above Meeker. And we're still sorting through that to see what's going on, but we're starting to get some information in that's starting to raise some flags and give us some signals to what's all going on here. You know, fish feeding is one that keeps coming to light. We've had a few folks actually bring forward that the fish food is the brine shrimp from Salt Lake, Great Salt Lake, that's 45% nitrogen. That's a pretty big nutrient there that they're putting in. And that they're feeding several tons of this stuff every month. So there's some things moving along there that we've identified. We've got another 2 years of study planned. We're going to complete this year and reevaluate because it's an adaptive management study. So as we get information, we change how we're directing this. And last year was pretty broad. So USGS is poised to start any day. As soon as the runoff keys, they're up there taking their samples. And we have an individual that's going up there as well and taking samples, I believe, weekly, looking for specific hits to trigger another set of specific analytes to be monitoring. So we're curious to see how we're going to see a reaction. Last year we had an extremely low flow. This year we're going to have a high flow. Maybe next year we'll have an average flow. I don't know. We're getting the two extremes. But we're prepared at the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District to do another flush flow, where we did a pulse flow out of there last year. We're prepared to do that again because that significantly seemed to really enhance the river's health and change all that. So there's a lot of folks, because I mean it's from above Meeker all the way to the confluence of the Green River that this stuff is happening. And I know the Colorado River, I've seen some pictures that I think, John, you sent it to me, to where they get hauling up dump truck loads of this stuff. That's nasty. You know, that's awful. But nobody is not exempt from being infected from this. Mermaid hair, however you want to say it. And we don't know if it's going to be later this year, earlier. Is it going to be heavier? We don't know how the river is going to react. So we're curious to see. That's all I have.
Al, I did have a question. At your White River Symposium, I ran into an employee of the town of Rangeley who appears to wear three hats. She's a planner, she's a town engineer, and she said she was the recreation coordinator and was working on recreation in the White River below Rangeley.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that? Just I thought that was an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people know about. Was kind of a...
Well, what she's been working on, and the town has been working on, is trying to figure out a means to do some economic stimulus. As you all know, Rangeley has really been hamstringed. And we've identified that there is, without storage, there is no additional water to be developed. They're trying to figure out what would be the best thing that they can do for their community to utilize the resources that they have. So if they're looking at doing several river access points, doing some cleanup on the river, that's kind of things that she's looking at. She's hoping to do a carnival of some sort next year, I guess, down along the river. I'm not sure. That's still kind of preliminary. But they're trying to work collaboratively with some of the landowners and BLM to do some olive tree remediation and just river health projects down there, because they realize that river is an asset for them. But one of the concerns that they have and questions they have that's been identified is, we can do all this, and you can develop some potential economic spurs or stimulus for that. However, you have the lack of consistent flows in that river to sustain that new economic drive that you're trying to develop. So that's really where she's working, and I'm working my end, of course, where I work. But she's really taking an aggressive approach to where they can do it, and we're working collaboratively with them as well to do points even above Kenny Reservoir to get some public access in there for flatboarding, kayaking, whatever the case may be. So great.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chandler Henry.
Just a couple of updates also. Our State of the River is, I think, May 20th. Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. We've had good attendance the last couple of years, and I think we will this year as well. Been working on a big macro invertebrate project on the Gore River and Eagle River. The Eagle River Watershed Council, Eagle River Water and Sand, and Town of Vail has put a lot of money in to trying to figure out what is killing off all those macro invertebrates. Looks like in the Town of Vail, it's probably the lawns going right up to the river and people trying to save their trees from the bark beetles. Turns out that what you spray on those beetles also kills the bugs in the river, surprisingly enough. But they've had it looks like, this year's data looks like they're having some success in bringing those bugs back. And below the confluence or Dow Junction, they're dropping there. So a lot of work going on with that. And then the last thing I wanted to say is not directly water related, but it's tied in with Summit County subsidizing the federal government. Eagle County is doing that also. Forest Service was looking to shut down a bunch of our campgrounds, which is huge for our economy there. So the county and the towns are putting in about $150,000 to hire 4 full-time seasonal rangers to keep the campgrounds. Crazy.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Ezzard.
I was just going to say, Saguache County split in half, well, not quite in half, but there's the west side and the east side. And I guess thankfully for the ag for that part of it. Saguache County on the west part has pretty much been sustainable the way it's been. On the east part, which I don't know, it's in the San Luis Valley, but there's been questions that might actually be part of the Front Range. So I need an answer there. But several years ago, AWBI was in that area.
I remember that.
And there's a new group that has started back up, and they're trying to take 22,000 acres from the San Luis Valley, mainly in Saguache County, over to the Front Range. They're talking about a pipeline to the Arkansas or some other options. So I just want everyone to be aware that's out there, and you know that'll devastate a lot of people. But they're buying irrigation wells and then doing the transfer that way. So the ag's getting hit all around. We've also lost a lot of potato and alfalfa farms to hemp growers, which is fine, but again, it's food sources that we're losing.
Mr.
I would just, real quickly on Director Hazard's comments, Cleve Simpson from the Rio Grande Water Conservancy District gave a presentation at the IBCC on this most recent water grab, and I did reach out to him and indicated that to the extent we could be of assistance in helping them, we don't view taking ag out of production anywhere a good idea. You know, the Rio Grande does import water from the Colorado River Basin, not from this district, but from the Southwestern District. It's used for their augmentation program, but we also have a very good working relationship with them as an ag producer.
Well, and they've also, I went to the last presentation. I didn't know that they had been doing so many public presentations. But the presenter said he had presented to over 150 entities, and I'm thinking mainly the Front Range for financial assistance, which...
So far, at least at the IBCC, all of the Front Range entities denied being potential customers.
AWIDI broke their pick about 20 years ago. The same way again.
They were leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Mr. Roberts is still around, isn't he? Yes. Mr. Ely, Pickens County.
You know, I don't think we're actively litigating with anybody in the water court of any district.
Just this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an amazing thing. The concerns are always the same. Change of administration of the water, who's studying your demand in order to manage it.
Yeah.
Oh, then the study Steve referenced about Aspen was a result of opposition that was posed to two diligence applications that the city was running. And in an effort to resolve those opposition positions, the city agreed to do a demand management study. I'm not sure what would come up, but any municipal demand management always looks at support from some surface water diversion. So you never know what might get kicked up from.
It was an RFP for a study.
Yeah, I think it's already been let, that particular contract. Anyway, as far as the county goes, its river program is alive and kicking and very healthy. It's been able to accomplish a lot, at least in the upper valley.
Thank you. Ms. Whitmore.
Well, in Ouray County, we can get to Durango again. The good news is we've had a lot of snow, and so we're very grateful for all of that, for all the benefit of that, and hopefully our ag guys are going to be able to grow a lot more hay this year, because we all suffered last year, and many of our ranchers had to sell off, herds, part of herds. So hopefully that will improve this year. Our water study, our ongoing looking at options, because as you know, Ouray is a little bit behind some of the rest of the state in terms of coming up with water supply planning. So our study is almost completed. Pete Foster's gonna be over. We're gonna have a steering committee meeting April 23rd, I think, to talk about, you know, kind of where we are and what we need to do. And hopefully from that, we will have some very specific projects that we can start moving forward with. Some of them may be easy kinds of things, some of them may be more in your ballpark of looking at, you know, I may be coming to you and saying, give me your to-do list, right?
You have my number.
Indeed. So we've got lots of things like that out there, and we're looking at scheduling our State of the River meeting, because that was very well received last year. The only other comment I would have, I know that today our agenda was full with discussion of demand management, but hopefully we can maybe in July invite Becky Mitchell back and some of the members of the CWCD to have further discussions, as we discussed yesterday, about the in-stream flow program and some of our concerns about the in-stream flow program, because there will of course be another round of in-stream flow proposals up before the board in January, and I think there's some very important issues that we need to have conversation about before them. And hopefully we could maybe even talk to Southwestern District, and I think they do share some of the same concerns. So perhaps we could invite them as well. And Mark's not here. So for Montrose County, I would just report Montrose County has had a very successful water forum earlier this year. And I think Sue's looking at doing that again fairly soon. So I think from a public outreach and information education standpoint, I think everybody seems to be working really hard throughout the River District to get more messaging out and to educate and just make sure people are more informed, which, you know, again, with so many people coming in from out of state, I just got a call yesterday from somebody who just has a next door neighbor, I could take a guess from where, but we won't, who suddenly moved in and said, no, you can't access your ditch through my property. So it should be an interesting conversation Friday. So clearly, we need to keep doing the education piece. That's all.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Number one, I guess we'll be getting the schedule out of the States of the River meetings.
They are being scheduled as we speak.
If we could get a composite schedule out to everybody, that would be very good. I've also, as we've had staff adjustments and everything else the past few months, I'm really pleased, you know, and this is something that's always ongoing, but the way, you know, the staff is growing in terms of not number of staff.
This is going to be really clear. We are not growing in numbers.
But the way the staff themselves are growing individually and stepping up and stepping into new roles. I'm sure it's being, you know, encouraged at a management level, knowing you but you know, it's really encouraging to see, you know, staff growing into new roles and taking on new responsibilities and new skills and everything else. So I appreciate what you're doing on that aspect. And I guess, you know, one question maybe for Peter. I noticed in a news article, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that the Denver Water Board was actually suing Boulder over 1041. Were they trying to get out of 1041 on gross with large?
They are the position of, and I don't know that they have initiated a lawsuit or not yet, but the Boulder County Commissioners confirmed their staff determination that the 1041 permit was necessary for the gross enlargement, which of course will be located in Boulder. The position of Denver Water is that its FERC permit for gross reservoir effectively preempts the local regulation under 1041.
I was disappointed to see that.
They both, well, the last time I talked to Denver Water about it, including with their general counsel and general manager, or executive director, they said that they are they're still open to working out
Yeah.
A deal with Boulder County, similar to the way that Windy Gap filed for a 1041 permit for the Windy Gap firming project with Grant County, effectively under protest preserving rights, but going through the process. We'll see.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that director's concerns. We take a quick 5-minute break and then, let's take a very quick break. We will then move, we're going to jump over the project operations and move into our Battle Creek presentation because we've got folks from Wyoming here and their visa expires soon. So, so you'll be up in about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
So two, we'll
I'm gonna head the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Use that term.
I'm not dating, so I'm just trying to figure out.
What are we, what are we gonna do with the next?
Yeah, next one.
And it may happen this year.
Well, that's.
How you doing, Tom?
Really.
Welcome, gentlemen. Well, okay. We're back in session now, and we have some visitors from the North Country. And glad to have you here. Glad to have a good drive down, I hope. And could you introduce yourselves and go into the presentation?
Well, I'll start. My name's Larry Hicks. I work for the Conservation District in Bags, and then I also serve in the Wyoming Legislature and the Senate. Currently, I serve as Vice Chairman of the Appropriations Committee and then also Chairman of the Select Water Committee for the state of Wyoming. Want to thank you for the opportunity to invite us down, to give us a chance to come down and talk all things water. As I sit in the audience for the last hour, and I thought, you know, this sounds a lot like one of our water development select water committee meetings. Federal update, impacts of Forest Service activities, storage, in-stream flows, emergencies, water funding. The one thing that we haven't had in Wyoming yet that's reached to the level that you guys deal is the east-west slope. But as you'll see, we do deal with that issue in urban growth within the state of Wyoming. DCP and demand management. Right now, there's a lot of concern with demand management in the Colorado River Basin in Wyoming, and how do we strategically see what's coming down the pike as far as demand management. I think that's a lingering question in all of our minds as to, is there going to be similarities or dissimilarities, and is there going to be agreement on the Colorado as to what demand management? Obviously, you guys have different issues in some aspects than we do. With that, it is a pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity to visit with you about a great opportunity, I believe, for both the state of Wyoming and Colorado. But before I jump into the presentation, I would turn it over to each one of my cohorts here and allow them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So,
thanks, Larry. My name is Pat O'Toole. I'm an irrigator on the Little Snake River. It's been said that our family is the oldest continuous business in Routt County. I don't know if that's true, but we've been around for a while. We have ditches that start in Wyoming and irrigate Routt County lands, and I ranch in Moffett County also. We do appreciate it. And the chairman mentioned the Family Farm Alliance. If I give you a quick update, we had a conference call yesterday where we talked about many of the things you guys talked about today. It sounds like Senator Feinstein is looking at demand management legislation with some funding that might be problematic. We talked about infrastructure. There's both bipartisan in both houses. House and Senate are looking at an infrastructure bill. We've been having pretty positive discussions about that. They may end up being another funding source for things like we're going to talk about today. And Family Farm Alliance has been really involved in the Colorado River issues, as you guys are. And our two initial thrusts are going to be forest health, which is talked about here. And we used Forest Service's own discussion about 160,000 acre-feet of water that isn't in the North Platte system because of the unhealthy forest in Wyoming at the headwaters of the Platte River. So we're going to talk about that and talk about some solutions that we see. The other is this Water 4 initiative. Anybody that came to the Family Farm Alliance would have seen a great presentation that we're working on, where essentially the value of flood irrigation in the upper basin. And it is, ranchers don't realize that it's our flood irrigation that why there's no potential migratory bird listings. It's that habitat we provide, the river recharge aspect of it, which is getting more and more understood. Obviously the crop and the farmer making money, and the fourth part is holding together these landscapes. So that's going to be the two initiatives that we work on. I had great meetings with the commissioner, but sure want to be coordinating with you all on the Colorado River initiatives. So,
thank you, Pat.
Okay, I'm John Raftopoulos. We've got quite a bit of irrigated ground from Bags down. most of our head gates are in Colorado, but they irrigate some Wyoming lands. And as we go down the river, down the Little Snake, we have considerable acreage on the Little Snake. The Little Snake is kind of it's a really dynamic system. It'll have a lot of water early, and then later in the summer, it'll go way down as everybody pulls the water out. The return flows are very important, but historically speaking, before irrigation, the river used to go completely dry. But after irrigation, the river at least has a lot more water and return flows than it ever did before. But it's still a very short system. Now, the High Savory Dam that's there right now is a great asset because when it was built in the 2000s, but early 2000s. But as soon as the water goes down in July, they start releasing, which augments our irrigation. It helps a lot because of all the inflow, the return flows. So we're the last head gate as the water leaves Wyoming. We're still in Colorado, but it weaves in and out of the Colorado and Wyoming boundary. So we're the last head gate, so we're the ones that usually feel it the most. And then further down the river, when it gets dry like last year, you got water battles that occur. But we know how hard it is to build a reservoir anymore. I mean, there just haven't been any built. That's why this project is a long ways down the road of being able to be completed. Probably one of the few projects around that have had several $1 million thrown at it to get it to the position that it's out. Just needs more funding to get done. And all the environmental stuff has been, well, I don't know if all of it has, but a lot of it has. But it's a great project and benefits not only fish and recreation and irrigators, but it'd be a great project for Colorado to participate in. Because all the water flows down and goes from the Little Snake into the Yamp and the Yamp into the Green. So.
Now, how many times, I forgot, did the Little Snake cross the state line?
Oh.
I've forgotten how many
times.
31 was the number we came up with last summer.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So it's definitely not just the Wyoming River. No doubt about that.
Yes.
I'm Bob Davis, and I represent the Little Snake River Conservancy District. I've been working up there for 20-plus years on the Conservation District with the High Savory County Commissioner, with Carbon County, and many other things. And this project we started several years ago, and I think if we can come on board and show some cooperation between the states, that we may stand a chance to get something going on this, and it'll benefit us all.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'd just like to run through just kind of a little history and some background of the project for you, and then just where we'd like to explore some opportunities with the board as far as moving forward. With that, the project is called the West Fork of Battle Creek. You know, it's always interesting if you look at the history of the area up there. You know, I think it's appropriate anytime you talk about water that you use the word battle. So, you know. But just a little bit about the history of the Little Snake. You know, we have two major municipalities and a third area up there. For those of you not familiar with the Little Snake, this is known in Wyoming as the Tri-Cities area. And if you're looking for our office, it's located in the Metropolitan District of Bags. So, little history, John C. Fremont and his journals traveled up the Yampa and the Little Snake on one of his ventures back and forth looking for a transcontinental route across the United States. In 1844, he came up the Yampa and then turned and went up the Little Snake and then further went over into the Platte Valley, came back down into North Park. Very interesting journals, but quote here, he said, "The country here appeared more variously stocked with game than any part of the Rocky Mountains that he'd ever visited, and its abundance was owing to its excellent pasturage and its reputation as a dangerous battleground." Hence the word Battle Creek, Battle Mountain. 1838, a group of American fur trappers came in there. The first exploratory party ended up with a big battle on Battle Creek. Little history. The same reason that there were so many battles and it was renowned was because of the amount of wildlife and the diversity of habitats is also the very same reason that it attracted early ranchers into the valley. And as far as coming in with livestock, it was relatively late in Western history, but in 1872, a guy named Noah Rita trailed first cattle into the Little Snake River Valley, turned them loose at the confluence of Savory Creek. A year later, a gentleman named George Baggs from Texas brought a herd up from Texas and dropped them in the valley. After some severe winters in the 1880s and 1890s, sheep rapidly colonized that area of Colorado and Wyoming. By the 1900s, early 1900s, there was over 300,000 sheep grazing on today's route, Medicine Bow National Forest. Some of those were trailed as far as from Nevada. First territorial irrigation waters in the Little Snake, and this is Wyoming. I wasn't able to find when the first Colorado water rights were filed, but most likely at a very similar time. It may actually be a little earlier with some of the gold mining in the Hans Peak area, that there could have potentially been some water rights filed pre-1875. Just a little bit of history, a little bit of statistical. It's a tributary of the Yampa, the Green, and the Colorado rivers. Average annual water yield is 407,000 acre feet out of the Little Snake. The dry years, last year would have to equate to one of the lowest in the last 100 years. Was the third lowest in the last 100 years, upwards of 642,000 acre feet. It's very arid in the lower part of the Little Snake River Basin. It contributes 60% of the sediment load to the Yampa River, but only comprises 35% of the basin. There's approximately 20,000 acres of irrigated ground, and that includes both Wyoming and Colorado. Roughly, that breaks out as about 73% of that land in Wyoming and about 27% in Colorado. In Colorado, that irrigated ground lies in both Routt and Moffat counties, with the bulk of it in Moffat County. Irrigation is a larger water user in the Little Snake River Basin. Roughly about 50,000 plus or minus acre feet. That's consumptive use. Similar to you guys, the city of Cheyenne, our largest municipality, is the largest water rights holder in the basin. We do have the largest trans-basin diversion in the state of Wyoming. It's out of the Little Snake. There's 32 miles of pipeline that gather water on the west slope, and there is a very low notch in the Continental Divide, and they gravity flow that 20,000 acre feet of water off the Continental Divide to this low notch that then dumps in to Park Reservoir, which dumps into the North Platte River. That portion of the project is strictly a mitigation project for the water that they take out of the Snowy Range and then divert because of the North Platte being over-appropriated. It is our second largest now municipal water project in the state of Wyoming. Current in-basin stored water is the only stored water within the Little Snake, as John mentioned, is High Savory Reservoir, constructed in 2006. 23,000 acre foot reservoir, yields about 14,000 acre feet. Well, it's permitted to 14,000 acre feet of irrigation and municipal water. Provides water for both irrigators in Wyoming and Colorado. Just a little bit of Wyoming status in the Colorado River Basin to give you an idea of where we're at as the discussion goes forward. Is if we build another storage facility, where's that water coming from, whose account? So just get to won't go through the whole thing. Some of that's projections, but if you get down to under current conditions, it talks about Wyoming's share, where we're estimated depletions is just under 600,000 acre feet, which roughly leaves Wyoming as we sit today with about 250,000 acre feet on an average annual basis of unappropriated water that we're entitled to under the Colorado River Compact. If you read the Upper Colorado River Compact in 48, there's actually a provision that carves out special provisions for the Little Snake under Article 11. And it deals to the earlier conversation is how many times does the Little Snake River cross the state line? Whatever that number is, it's a lot. Those negotiators in the 48 Compact understood that. It basically takes the Little Snake and separates that and says that is reserved for the states. 50% Colorado, Wyoming. But if you go into subsection F under there, which specifically deals with the West Fork of Battle Creek project and the compact, it says water use projects initiated after the signing of this compact, to the greatest extent possible, shall permit the full use within the basin within the most manners feasible, with regardless of state line. So when we constructed High Savory in 2006, we had both an Attorney General's opinion from the state of Wyoming and an AG's opinion from the state of Colorado. That it's irregardless of which side of the state line we build that storage on, you can't deny the other side of the state that water. Because High Savory was a mitigation project for the municipal water being diverted to the other slope, that water was 100% going to Wyoming. So as part of that component, High Savory also mitigated those impact of those Colorado water users, also 100% of the state's cost. And that's the fundamental difference of what we're looking at with High Savory because of the nature of the mitigation. And what we're looking at the West Fork of the Battle now is actually looking at a shared component because of 70% of the water to Wyoming, 30%. And that's based on the potential serviceable ground underneath that reservoir. So moving on, in 2008, where we started with the West Fork of Battle Creek, we did a preliminary investigation to identify 13 potential sites to alleviate irrigation deficiencies in the basin. One of the criteria that we gave the consultants right off the bat, that there had to be a net conservation gain for fisheries. Moving to the new era of construction of dams, a couple philosophical things when we started looking at this. One was high elevation, one was to build redundancies in different watershed instead of one large facility. Just the nature of the snowpack that we see, we can be as much as 30 or 40% difference by moving 30 miles within the watershed. So to develop redundancy, high elevation, low evaporation, well, we explicitly said we have to have a net conservation gain. And so that became the driving factor looking at all the permit issues as we move forward. Anyway, so the next component of that in 2008 in this preliminary investigation, it was determined that in 2010 the West Fork of Battle had the least environmental impacts and the highest potential for mitigation. With only 1.5 acres of wetland, it's in a large granitic rocky canyon, high elevation, some other challenges. So in 2013, the Wyoming legislature appropriated $7 million to move forward with more detailed investigations and study. 2014-17, refined the hydrological analysis. One of the things that came up is there is a legacy copper mining site that Ferris Haggerty Copper Mine that was on EPA's Superfund cleanup site that they pretty well wrote off, and with the state of Wyoming established a total maximum daily load of the amount of copper. It basically sterilized the system for quite a few miles. This mine portal sits 6 miles upstream. We spent the next 2 years doing some very significant scientific investigations and detailed studies and analysis to determine the effect of that copper on any potential downstream storage sites. That really delayed the project. Took an extra 2 years just to try to get our hands around dealing with the copper in the legacy mine. The good news is all of the analysis showed that we wouldn't create a toxic situation. In fact, part of that, the state of Wyoming has committed a significant amount of AML money to actually remediating. We'll never eliminate the copper, but we can remediate it to a point where it's less environmentally toxic, and particularly in the aquatic environments where copper tends to be the most lethal. Not so much for mammalian life or plant life, but for aquatic life, it's extremely toxic. In 2017, the Wyoming legislature appropriated $4.7 million to start looking at land acquisition and trades with the Forest Service. Part of the land is on Forest Service. They did put a caveat on that. There's an asterisk that said before any of that we could move forward with any land acquisition or swaps, that we needed some level of commitment from Colorado on a pro rata basis as the benefits of the reservoir. So all told, we've appropriated about $11.4 million on the project. And that's why we're here today with the footnote that was put on there. All right. I'm stuck. Where's my IT?
Your icons.
How do we get rid of that thing? Okay. All right.
Wow, yeah.
See how easy that was?
Yeah.
There's a lesson there. Anyway, this gives you kind of just a visual schematic of what the reservoir, the elevation at the reservoir is about 8150. That's Highway 70 that goes between Baggs and Encampment, Wyoming, just above the Colorado line right there. The two drainages that you see upstream is Haggerty Creek on the left, is where at the very headwaters of that's where the old mine portal, and then a smaller tributary, Lost Creek. You can see the body of the reservoir would impound back over the confluence of those. Once those two tributaries meet, that becomes the West Fork of Battle Creek. Just a few more statistics on the reservoir. The dam site is on U.S. Forest Service land. The body of the reservoir is mostly on a patent mining claim. It's one of the old 1800 patent mining claims. We've talked to the owner of those. They're very interested in selling those lands for all practical purposes. Because it's in the canyon, it's not real estate development property, and quite frankly, they'd love to sell those to the state of Wyoming. The reservoir has a capacity of 10,000 acre feet. It's conceptually designed with a 6,500 acre foot irrigation pool, 1,500 acre foot habitat minimum flow releases, and then 2,000 acre feet would be the conservation fisheries pool to provide permanent recreation and fisheries benefit. One of the unique aspects of this project, when we said we want a net conservation gain for fisheries, is the Little Snake has the largest enclave of pure native Colorado River cutthroat trout left in the whole upper Colorado River basin. Haggerty, the Belvedere Ditch has one of the pure strains that's ever been sampled. What this project would effectively allow us to do is go in here and rehabilitate everything above the dam, so all of Lost Creek, all of Haggerty Creek, and then connect with one of the ditches that pulls out of there. It's actually interesting that the ditches save the cutthroat. It's the brood source for all Colorado River cutthroat in the state of Wyoming that they got into that ditch when they built that in the early 1900s. But that being said, this would afford the opportunity to establish another enclave of pure strain Colorado River cutthroat within the basin. So it has a potential candidate ESA nexus there. So again, one of the areas that we looked at is the net conservation game with the reservoir. Downstream of that would be managed as a rainbow trout fisheries, and the pool would be managed for Colorado River cutthroat too. Surface area, this is not a large dam. It's only 130 acres. It is a tall dam, 260 feet, 108 feet long, and it's conceptually designed to be a roller compacted concrete, so water is just going to run over the top of the dam as the spillway. There again, the yield on that is 8 out of 10 years. That's a criteria that the state of Wyoming uses on primarily irrigation reservoirs, that 8 out of 10s. So service area, let's talk about the implications of how this project plays into Wyoming and Colorado. Roughly 19,000 acres on the main stem of the Little Snake would be serviceable out of this reservoir. Approximately 14,000 acres in Wyoming and about 5,000 acres in Colorado. Current irrigation shortages, when we looked at shortages in the basin on the main stem and then the basin as a whole, we can go from an extremely wet year where we have 0 shortages, we can go to a bad year where we have 20,000 acre feet of shortages. On the worst hydrological years that we've experienced have been in the last 2 decades. 2012 and 2000, last year in 2018 are hydrologically 2 of the worst years in the last 100 that we've experienced. One of the reasons that this project has become increasingly important is because of that. We are not seeing the High Savory Reservoir filling like it was hydrologically anticipated to fill 8 out of 10 years. It's filling about 6.5 out of 10 years. So even that reservoir is not meeting the defined irrigation benefits that we had originally anticipated based on the hydrology. West Fork on an average year could reduce any of those in-basin shortages by up to 60%. There's roughly 100 irrigators that would be eligible to participate to prescribe for water out of the West Fork of Battle Creek. This just gives you an illustration of where those shortages are in that service area. The very upper right hand, the little blue dot up there is where the West Fork of Battle Creek would be. There's a little bit of service in Wyoming, and it runs into Colorado and Routt County. Most of the Little Snake there, until you get almost down to the confluence of Savory, is in Routt County. You can see the county line splits right there. So that shows the distribution of those lands. And this is both main stem and on stem. It shows where the deficiencies in irrigation water are. The red's on Willow Creek, that wouldn't be serviced. You can see the state line that runs through there. The orange to the right of that, Slater Creek, and then some other tributaries in there. But most of the, and I think John could attest for this, most of the really demand is on the lower end on the Colorado side from the reservoir. That's where most of the shortages. You know, high already means a lot. Sometimes priority is, and so even priority sometimes.
Even further down the river, there's more.
Yeah, and there is
demand.
more grounds in Colorado and Moffat County down there. There's another several thousand acres of irrigated ground down there. This reservoir isn't designed conceptually, but we know anecdotally just from High Savory that those return flows are having a positive impact all the way down to the confluence with the Green for those lower irrigators in Moffat County. But to actually deliver water and sell on a purchase, acquisition, and delivery, this reservoir isn't designed to actually deliver water that far down the system. Are they going to benefit? I think absolutely. The High Savory's demonstrated that. With that, we did run through a cost-benefit analysis of this project. This was the last thing we did as irrigation benefits, and these are prorated over a 50-year estimated time frame. Certainly the dam has a life expectancy much longer than that, but over 50 years is about $51 million in irrigation benefits. 4.3, that's just for the flat water recreation on the reservoir itself. Habitat flow benefits is about $35 million. And then construction benefits, just those jobs to stimulate the economy. We'd anticipate that some of these jobs would probably be coming out of Craig, Colorado. It's the largest town of the closest vicinity to the actual construction of the project. Total public benefits is about $74 million. Already went through the permitting and design with the state of Wyoming. Estimated construction cost is about $73 million. One of the things that we are pursuing right now that we would want to enlist your support and help with is last year, the Pothook Water Conservancy District, which represents those irrigators on the Colorado side of the line in both Routt and Moffat County, and then the Savory Little Water Snake Water Conservancy District filed an application through NRCS's PL 566 program for funding, and that requested $1.5 million to complete the NEPA and the 404 permit process, and then about $20 million in capital construction costs as that moved forward. The project applicants for that PL 566 were the two water conservancy districts in Wyoming. Project cooperators is another thing we're looking at. Wyoming Water Development Commission, we would certainly like to entertain a discussion with the board today about entering in as a partner on that application as a cooperator. And then probably on a broader discussion is you know, you guys have a tremendous amount of technical expertise that we could certainly use moving forward on a joint project. I think whether it's a federal application for funding or other alternatives to look as we move through infrastructure bills, if we do see something move in Congress with water infrastructure, I think, again, these are model type projects that we could look at as joint cooperative between two different states. There's some unique opportunities if you look at the makeup of the different congressional delegations to be able to harness the power of both states to get something that's good for both states. if we end up with an infrastructure bill. But I guess right now, our immediate request is we want to refile the PL 566 project. And we would love to have the opportunity to tap into some of your technical expertise with your staff and make that a joint Wyoming-Colorado project moving forward. I believe that the way the Wyoming legislature is constructed and as a joint application, it would meet Colorado's pro rata requirement for us to continue to appropriate the rest of the money to move forward with that the 20 million would certainly meet those requirements that the Wyoming legislature put on there. Colorado's participation would be assisting with securing those federal dollars for a project. So with that, I appreciate the time, and I don't know if any of the other gentlemen here have anything they want to add to that, Pat, but.
Yeah, I have a couple things. So, as you all know, the Family Farm Alliance represents irrigators in the western states, and you know, I remember 15 years ago when we were told there'll never be another dam built in the west. Well, we all know that's not accurate, and so we have constantly worked with delegations in the western states about dollars for irrigation, more opportunity for storage, you know, and all of us, especially after the Yampa being called last year, gave us a wake-up call. It's just a reality check on a river that we never thought we would see the kind of year we had it. So we have enlisted the PL 566. Many of our members in the Family Farm Alliance have been using it, and it potentially is a really strong program that can help from the USDA side. We also think that there's going to be dollars on whether this infrastructure bill comes or the interior side. You know, our sort of modus operandi is using both USDA and interior to fund projects in our community, and we think that that's going to be the future. So you would take state, interior, USDA, and in this case, 2 states. So we really appreciate Clint Evans came today, from the head of NRCS at Colorado's here. We appreciate that very much, Clint. And I met last week with Astrid Martinez from the head of NRCS in Wyoming. So we've been talking to the various players along the way, and you know, we just think it's a project that will enhance our valley. I was in the legislature when we put together the High Savory. You know, I'm very aware of how difficult it can be, but we think this is a project that is very permittable and will have such incredible benefits. And you know, we all know that storage works, but what's interesting about High Savory is how it's more recent. And we saw, as John said, you know, the water just keeps redoubling with the return flows. And so putting this reservoir higher in the system will make a tremendous difference for us. You know, we have a lot of historical background. I don't know if any of you all remember back, you know, when President Carter vetoed the Savory Pothole. That was going to be 100,000 acre feet for our valley, and it would have been a whole different community. You know, we now have High Savory and this, and Larry has worked to put a lot of small storage in our valley that I would just tell you from my operations, some things he did a couple of years ago were the reason why we were able to run cattle in the forest for an extra month. So we know water, we understand the benefits of storage, and I think the opportunity to work together as 2 states will be a model. And the last thing I'll talk about is we did go to the Yampa Roundtable and made a presentation, the Water Development Commission did. We got a letter supporting this process. But when you look at the Yampa system, the Yampa White system, the obvious need for small storage, watershed storage is going to be everywhere. And I think us modeling this process will be, you know, a great message. You know, you can get storage done, and this is a correct direction for us to be going. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to point out one thing. You know, it was said that there are 100 irrigators. These are 100 small businessmen that we're talking about, not just irrigators out there. You know, so that would.
What do you mean, just irrigators?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, I mean, that's.
You know, just guys with shovels out there. But yeah, there's small businessmen that we're dealing with here, and you know that's quite an impact. 100 small businesses and the tax revenue and everything that they pay. It's pretty sizable.
We don't call anybody just irrigators here.
Fighting words.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gray.
Could you, by the way, we, Eldon and I and Doug have all seen the site and been in communication. Larry, talk a little bit about what you anticipate the cost to those 100 irrigators, because they're going to have to actually pony up some money. And talk a little bit about that.
So right now, we've actually run some of the economic analysis on that, and so what we anticipate doing is actually blending this water with high savory. And because that was a mitigation project, again, for both water users in Wyoming and Colorado, as a result of that municipal trans-basin debate, that water is, I will just say, it's extremely cheap. If we just sold the West Fork of Battle Creek, we're looking at about $23 to $25 an acre foot. Once we blend that, because there's 14,000 acre feet in high savory, 5,000 acre feet of water that we think we can deliver every year out of the West Fork of Battle Creek. You know, you pool those, that brings that water down to the neighborhood of somewhere around $11 to $14 an acre foot for that water. So under that funding model that we're looking at, under the Wyoming State's criteria, the irrigators are going to be responsible for about $9 million of that. We've calculated that $23, that $24, $25 includes that repayment for those capital construction costs. The way the state program works is the Water Conservancy District can take, it's a 91% loan program for this project because of the public benefit. 9% repayment, but they will lend those irrigators a loan for that repayment, 30 years at 4% interest. So you calculate that out, it comes out of the West Fork water. Standalone is going to be 23 to 25. You blend that with high savory, you get a price down there on today's dollars would be about $12 an acre foot. So it pencils out economically once we factor in that high savory. That's the model that we're operating under right now. I hope that answers the question.
Well, it does, and let me just say that was one of the things I wanted to listen to last summer was that to make sure that it wasn't some pie-in-the-sky number that operators couldn't afford, and because you really do have to make it affordable, and you have to get participants to say, yeah, I'll take some. And so that was a big thing for me is that, okay, this is being planned on a basis that actually you'll have people who will be able to afford it and will want to.
Yeah, and just a little bit more on that. High savory was vastly overprescribed. There was way more demand than there was even water. It was anticipated that we'd sell 12,000 shares, 12,000 acre feet out of water. We actually sold on one share per irrigated acres and ended up with 14,032, and then we had requests for more water to buy if there was any above and beyond that. The demand is there. With the loan program with the state of Wyoming, I think we can make this an affordable project, and it would be the ownership of the conservancy districts would end up owning this facility.
So that cost break. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Munger from
So I just to follow up on Director Gray's question too. So I mean, it's great to buy the car. Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance and keeping the car running? And so I guess that's what you're talking about there as well. Is that because we know as a board, and my other job is the Upper Yampa, dams are not cheap either. So they cost money to run. So there are maintenance things.
And that $23 to $25 includes initially about $1 per acre charge to build up a sinking fund until you get that sinking fund built up to say $250,000 to $500,000 for any major replacement. That's part of that $23 to $25. This includes a little bit every year you pay into that sinking fund until you get to that whatever we set that cap at. And that'll be something that the engineers will have to come back and tell us what's a reasonable amount of money to put in that sinking fund for O&M cost and major maintenance.
You could stick around for our next discussion about what it's going to cost us this year to maintain Little or you might want that cap up.
Yeah, we've got one of those called High Savory too,
yeah,
so
yeah,
we're pretty familiar with what it costs to operate and maintain one.
I understand.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's something that obviously is got to be part of that initial upfront cost.
Well, we all know how difficult it is to permit one of these things and how few there really are. This one's down the road quite a ways and benefit for both states. So just all the work that's been put into it, I think it's a great project.
Mr. Vandenbrink, yeah.
The cost benefit, for the cost you're talking about, was it $3 to $5 per acre foot of storage? Did I understand that
For
correctly?
high savory.
For high savory. Okay, because that has to be based upon a cost, the cost benefit analysis is how you're really working that thing down then. Because when you do the construction cost versus storage volume, that doesn't pencil out.
No, because high savory was a mitigation reservoir. So the state of Wyoming, with our municipality, we spent $200 million diverting all that water out of that basin. So the state of Wyoming funded the construction of high savory at 100% to mitigate that. So the only thing, and then they, as part of that, they also put up an initial O&M account. So our contract with the state of Wyoming is a 5-year renewable contract. Those prices are indexed to the CPI. Right now, we're paying the $3.50 an acre foot for that water. Every 5 years, we'll go back and look at what CPI is an index and those inflation. But all the original, because it was a mitigation for taking water out of that valley, 100% of the capital construction was paid for by the state. The original sinking fund that was set up, and it is a state-owned, state-run facility, so they bear the cost of the O&M on that facility. So the only thing the irrigators pay for is pay for the annual operation costs. Okay. Not any long-term major maintenance costs. That's already in an account set aside for that project. But I hope that clarifies.
Yes.
This is a little different model here.
And I'd like to point out on the original, when they originally were trying to prescribe the 12,000 shares for the high savory reservoir, it was based on $12 per share, and that's been 14 years ago.
Wow.
And they didn't have any problem selling it at $12 per share.
Yeah.
So,
You would have bought that, right, Alvin? Yeah.
well, just a little bit of the nature. Prior to high savory, that valley was a net importer. We, on an average hydrological year, we would import about 400,000 tons of hay in there to feed the amount of livestock in that valley. On a bad year, it could be upwards of 1 million tons of hay.
Wow.
Since high savory has come online, we import, other than the very bad years that we had a real severe heavy snowpack winter this year with the drought last year, we did import hay, but since high savory's come online, there's only been 2 out of the last 13 years that we've actually imported any hay. It's had that pretty substantial input. And you know, again, the Colorado nexus can't be overplayed. The economic hub for that whole valley is Craig, Colorado. Most of the equipment, the merchandise, everything, the groceries, the food, the health.
I thought Bags was the economic hub.
Well, it's the metropolitan area of the Tri-Cities area. I don't know that I would call Bags an economic hub, but I could be accused of gross exaggeration if I said something like that.
But you know, Larry, also the aftermath that's produced is huge.
No, that's...
The re-irrigation, irrigation for the second after the crop is put up. It's huge. With that, and the high savory probably contributes a lot. I mean, you would have no water for regrowth.
That's exactly right.
Mr. Alvey.
So one of the earlier slides you showed indicated that a good percent of the sediment load comes in from the Little Snake. Have you accounted for that? I've got a reservoir on Muddy Creek and I regret it because of the sediment load. So are you factoring that in?
Yeah, so when you look at the Little Snake Basin as a whole, the upper Little Snake, so above Muddy Creek, so basically from, let's say, Willow Creek on this, the next big tributary on the Colorado side that comes in, it only accounts for 14% of the total sediment load in the Little Snake. It's Muddy Creek, Sand Creek, Vermilion Creek, it's all that lower basin stuff that is the giant silt contributor to the Yampa. So the upper basin's relatively silty. But back to your other part of your question is absolutely. We've even in the lower and the upper state, we've invested millions of dollars into river restoration work and bank stability work on the main stem, and we've reduced billions of tons of sediment yield, even from the town of Bags up. And then on Muddy Creek itself, we take out somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 billion tons of sediment. It just picks it right up once it gets to John's place down there and sends it on down to the amp.
How does this affect?
Go ahead, yeah.
No,
just a minute, you follow up here.
Just one other question about that, and you may have addressed this and I missed it, but the depletions associated with this reservoir would be charged to whose compact? In Wyoming or Colorado, since it's a shared project?
So out of High Savory's, again, the mitigation nature, that was debited 100% against the state of Wyoming's, which technically about 30% of the High Savory water, again, goes to Colorado users. It probably should have been debited, but it didn't. And again, it's the mitigation for Colorado water users also. This is going to have to be prorated out based on what we end up with some level of formula. But the beauty is a 10,000 acre foot reservoir, we're not talking. You know, if you go back to the Yampa PBO, I can't remember what the Yampa River reserved for future depletions under the programmatic biological opinion. We reserved 50,000 acre feet of future depletions on the Wyoming side. We've only done about 1,000 acre feet since the programmatic biological opinion was done. But part of this would probably be what we're talking, maybe hundreds of acre feet of water that would be debited against Colorado's share on both the Colorado River.
Mr. Vanderbrink, question.
In November, I actually missed your presentation of the Basin Roundtable because I was actually touring your basin for this project specific while I was on a hunting trip.
I see.
Yeah, there's another side to this. But I did make a concerted effort to see what you have for a project going on, but also see the benefits that's providing for your basin. It's very evident where the water ends, and it's very evident where the water begins. It's very organized. It looks very efficient what they have down in there. And to move forward with the Colorado River District, I think in Colorado we need to get some sort of a quantified cost benefit on this thing to what we're looking at if we are to support this or in what fashion to really do this. And I'd be supportive of that because I think there's some value that the Yampa would get and Colorado would get out of that for the development of maybe some land in Moffett County. Because I know there's quite a bit of agricultural land that was identified within the Basin Implementation Plan that is marginal, but it needs water to be developed. But really, like you said, building a storage project, they're kind of tough. They're kind of tough to get done. And I know that firsthand. But I also see the benefits that it can do to help stimulate areas that are struggling, but also develop lands that if they had the water, well, you could really, really zip things up and create a new source of income and viability for a part of the world and bring more to other counties in the state. So I'd like to see what we can get for some information behind here.
And well, Mr. Manager, would this be a good candidate for the rubric?
Yeah, well, I think it probably would, but I just wanted to ask a couple questions so that we're all, I think I've heard, but I want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. You're looking for us to be the co-project cooperator with Wyoming on this. And in such, you're looking primarily for technical advice and co-application support. Monetarily, is there any kind of a cash contribution that you're aware of from the PL 566 world that we would need to be anticipating at this stage in the game or any future stage so that we can anticipate it? And maybe before you answer that, let me be fair. What President Merritt is talking about is internally we have developed at the River District a rubric or basically a
Evaluation
flow
criteria.
chart and evaluation criteria for requests for assistance. And so we're a small organization, we're spread pretty thinly, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we allocate our resources in the areas where they can have the best possible chances of making important impacts. And so we take any new request through this process, we evaluate it, understand what the costs are, likelihood of success, all those kind of things. All the things you've hit.
How much staff time it's going to take?
How much staff time, our commitment, so that we know what we're getting into, so that we're capable of holding up our end of the bargain with our partners on something like this, and we know that ahead of time. But so we'd want to do that, or I would suggest we'd want to do that. But those two questions kind of popped into my mind.
So conceptually, the way that I think that we would phrase our request at this point in time is specific to the PL 566 project, is to use your, work with your staff and your technical expertise to be able to put that application together. Now, we've requested that 1.5 million on the planning side. We've indicated that the state of Wyoming, through our current appropriation, would match that at 50% with the federal government. And so we would match that because we've got that 11.4 million, 7 million is unrestricted on how we could spend that. And it was already designed to do exactly that. So we would match that application, the state of Wyoming would, that 1.5 to the NRCS PL 55 for basically the final EIS 404 permitting, final design, all of that stuff. So we're not requesting any financial assistance. As we move forward and go back to NRCS for that $20 million in capital construction costs, again, we would anticipate that would be Colorado's contribution towards the project, which again, what we're asking for is that technical support that the River District can bring to help get that process up and running, organization. So we're not asking for any at this time, unless there's another program, if this doesn't fly. At this time, we're only asking for your technical support to help us move through the federal process, work with your delegations, our delegations, get a cooperative project in place and pursue this federal funding for this process. So no financial contribution as far as right now. It's going to be more, it's going to be utilizing your existing infrastructure with your staff and those resources. That's how we've conceptualized how we would move this project forward.
If I could add, Larry, we wouldn't turn any money down.
Maybe you wouldn't.
Smart man.
Well, I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion that we direct staff to evaluate this and, determine if we have the capability to, participate in this.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Gray, we have a second by Trampy. Any further discussion?
Can I, just a couple
Clarify, yeah.
Timing, what are you anticipating? When do we want to get this grant application in?
I think, and we're still waiting, and maybe Clint knows, but the last correspondence that we've got from our NRCS is they're in contact with the Washington, D.C. office that oversees the PL 566 sometime later this summer or early summer. So last year, I think it was August that we had to have this submitted. We don't have a firm time frame yet. We're waiting for the last I heard, and Clint, maybe you know something. That's the last I heard from our state.
So what I heard this morning was that the guidance on the new 566 funding for 19 should be forthcoming within the next couple of weeks. So we'll receive something. NRCS state offices will know something on funding requests. I'd say by the first of the month, and then we'll be sending out a notification to partners that will submit apps.
And Mr. Evans, would you anticipate those applications being due sometime in August, or do you have any?
Yeah, I would, if it's consistent with the last couple of years, be late July, early August would be the time.
Okay.
Yes,
Can I ask you, we've obviously worked with you closely on Colorado-centric projects on some PL 566 monies. I understand Wyoming applied for this individually and was told you need to make it a joint project. We understand why. There's benefit to Colorado. The water's being used here, would be used here. Have you seen or are you aware of two-state or multi-state applications? Because I just worry about the complexity at the NRCS and how that gets run through your process. I just described our little rubric process, but I think yours is a little more frightening to me. So.
Yeah, I don't have any personal experience with multi-state watershed operations applications for 566 funding. However, I do think in this situation, Wyoming would be the lead on it for submitting the application. And essentially all they'll want from me is some sort of concurrence saying that, yes, I support the project and that there is benefit to Colorado also is what they'd be looking for me at this point.
The other thing I'd add is, we have talked to both delegations, Colorado and Wyoming, and I think that's what makes this even more exciting is really there's a kind of a coordination and capability there. They all know, both states know about it. I think we'll be supportive, and I think that's what makes it so interesting.
No, I think it's pretty clear to us you've done a good job communicating with both.
Okay, yes, sir.
So I guess we have a motion.
We have a motion and a
so I
second, we're
guess
doing
comment.
discussion.
You know, I guess this kind of follows what we've been talking about a little bit, about high mountain reservoirs.
Yep.
Lack of the intensive evaporation, and my desire to make sure that we have our local water stored in locally available pools. And, you know, I'm still very leery about the Lake Powell pool, and I'm supportive of that. But, you know, again, I'm very concerned about the money, and you guys missed our poor boy discussion yesterday. I mean, basically, you know, just like everybody else, we're heavily energy dependent, and how that's affecting us. So we're, and again, I really support the project, and I've been up there, and I know it very much helps my constituency in the North Route area when the road comes into our county and then goes back out. But anyhow, I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm very supportive of the project and how we would move forward, but I'm a little leery about how we're going to come up with funds for it. So, and again, realistic part of our discussion.
So, Sonia, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm curious, Clint, at one point during discussions with the Colorado River District staff, you guys had talked about the way NRCS prioritizes PL 566 projects and the way you fund them. First, addressing projects that have shortfalls that are previous NRCS projects, or something didn't go right with construction that you have to fix. How is that a federal priority, or is that just Colorado? And how might this project affect other PL 566 projects that we put forth to the state, to NRCS, and to the national competitive program?
Sure. So in response to the first part of your question about the NRCS prioritizing prior projects that needed corrections or fixes, that's a national level criteria that was put into place. So that was put in place by senior leadership, acting Chief Jordan at the time, for NRCS. So as far as I know, that still stands as a top priority. As far as how this project would compete with other projects being submitted, yeah, from Colorado, I really don't know. You know, the biggest limitation with any of our USDA programs is funding. Although the last couple of years, you know, 566 has been funded somewhere around, I think, $75 or $100 million annually. I think there's a backlog nationwide of around $500 million in project applications. So it's a pretty steep competitive process for any and all projects that are going in. So, but as far as what that chicken or egg, who's going to come first and how they're going to outrank, I can't predict.
Yeah, no, I just was curious about this backlog issue, because that's one of the things we've been told about our projects, that new projects kind of fall to the bottom of that prioritization. And then, so I guess following on that is just where are you all at with regard, I'm assuming that they're going to have to develop an NRCS watershed plan in order to be eligible for these funds, correct, Clint?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, okay. And where are you all at with that in terms of your schedule for getting this project done, and when you might get NEPA done and then go to construction?
So specific to the issue of where we're at as far as the NRCS watershed project, all the data is collected. We've done an entire watershed study for the Wyoming side of the Little Snake, the 10 years of pre-engineering and evaluation. It's just a matter at this point in time taking all the information and putting it in NRCS's format. We understand that it takes a long process, but the data is there. In Wyoming, we've done one major rehab project with PL 566. Most of it, the projects that we've done, have revolved around flood planning for a couple of municipalities. Through PL 566, we are just redoing a spillway on a similar size reservoir in the northern part of the state with the PL 566 project that we use both water development and PL 566 programs with. But, you know, if we just walk through the guidelines, submitting the application and going through, we're probably talking best case scenario is if we received the federal funding and got through the watershed plan in that format, we're talking 2022. And at that point in time, we would hope to be able to go ahead and pull the trigger on moving forward with the record of decision with the core permit and all that stuff. So Realistically, we're talking from now 2.5 years before we would get through all the environmental documentation and the watershed plan. And we've already done some preliminary consultation with the Army Corps of Engineers, and from the Corps standpoint, we have this in writing. This is an EA level decision. This is not an environmental impact set. So the EIS would be driven by the Forest Service. One of the things that we've been trying to do is actively pursue a land swap. You know, it simplifies the NEPA process substantially. It's private or state land instead of Forest Service land. That being said, PL 566 dollars are still going to have to comply with NEPA. Having worked with NEPA, NRCS's NEPA should be the model for all federal agencies. So I hope that, you know, that we're realistic on the timelines. We've dealt with this a little bit before. The priority thing is we all know how it works in Congress, that priority moves up and down the list. Just depend on who's in the chain of command in Congress as far as where that list goes. And we do think that is one of the big benefits of a bi-state cooperative project. It would potentially, that $500 million backlog could move the project quicker up the list.
Mr. Gray, you had a comment?
Yeah, just quick, I know we talked about it quite a bit. One of the things that we did in our basin, starting way back when the roundtables were formed, is early on we did a needs assessment, where we have shortages. And we identified plenty of places where there's shortages, but we had no proponents. And as a roundtable, or as any, you got to have somebody that's, you can't push them, somebody's got to come forward. Well, these guys, that little valley up there is very forward-thinking, and they're a proponent. So that's, early on, it was like, okay, we have somebody that has identified shortages, and they are making a proposal. They want to help themselves and help us. We're all in this, so it's multiple benefit as well. But I just wanted to say, you know, in the country, rural areas, it's hard to get together and bring entities together and actually propose something. Because of the stuff we talked about for the last hour, the complications, the permitting, the funding, all of that makes it so scary. Most people just go, you know, we need more water, but how do you get it? So I just wanted to put a plug in that we have a proponent, and, you know, as much as we can, after we do the analysis, let's help them as much as we can.
Well, thank you. We have a motion and a second to direct staff to work with the proponents and look at how we can participate in this project if it can be done within our available staff resources. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, and Mr. Courier and your minions together.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, real quick, I'm kind of a new guy on the Appropriations Committee, but I understand what it's like to say no, no, and no. We don't have any money. So good luck on your further deliberations.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Senator.
Oh, yes. So now, my friend, Mr. Carter.
Oh, Carter Valley?
Yeah.
Still gotta fix
It sounded like all they wanted was
Right, and actually we are over there grant application. Yeah, the last time. Yeah. That's good. So much got it. I just think some of the is going to be. Boy, actually, I went from well, anyway. I would think yeah, I was going to say they can fight with I agree. They actually do this project. It took them a little.
Time, hopefully we'll keep this Wolford LCAT update really, really short. I think Don can just give a brief overview of the hydrology. I know we got most of that yesterday, so we'll keep that piece really short. And then I'm going to just turn it over to Ray and let him talk through, you know, the nuts and bolts of actually, you know, the work plan for replacing a 96-inch upstream gate and the whole work plan for the summer. And yeah, those guys should be in here because, you know, we're going to be spending more than $1 million on a reservoir. I spent most of my career telling clients that, hey, don't build a reservoir unless you really need it because you're going to have to maintain it. With that, take it away.
Real quick, Wolford, 103% of average is projected for inflow. At Elkhead, 110% of average is projected for inflow. Wolford's on the way down, Elkhead on the way up. That's about 56,000 acre feet into Wolford. We have a 33,000 acre foot hole, so we have ample to fill. We want to bypass some to help out the effort with the main gate replacement, keep the elevation down, help the divers to be more efficient. So as far as hydrology into Wolford, we're looking pretty good. I don't want to see it decline too much more. We'd like to spill as well and be in the conduit for a little bit after once we spill. That's probably all I need to say about hydrology.
You know, one of the interesting hydrology pieces here is, a week ago or so, we had 22 inches of ice on the reservoir, and they can't really get in and start working on that, you know, gearing up to do this main gate replacement until we have ice off the reservoir. So that's a significant flyer in the schedule. Because we had significant ice, we still have significant ice. 14 inches, I think, yesterday.
So that 14 inches, is that lake wide, or I mean?
Yes.
So I mean, there's not places where it's,
we're starting to get some free water.
There's several places around the tower.
So it's where we need it. It's probably going to be the last place to.
We need it to be ice-free because when our ice sheet is detached from the shore, the wind blows it around, and it breaks stuff up.
Yeah. We don't want 100,000 tons of ice crashing into these guys' barge in the middle of the night. So.
Put somebody down the hole. Yep.
So I did prepare a memo for you folks. Pretty much the hydrology is a little bit different, but nonetheless pretty much the same. We're going to fill at both reservoirs. I have one action item here, and that's for your continuing services agreement with Landmark to survey the deformation monuments at Wolford. Heretofore, we've been doing this in a series of one-year contracts under the GM's authority. We're going to use the same surveyor because changing surveyors is difficult. They never agree quite with each other. So there's always a painful period as you try to figure out, did it move or didn't it? And Landmark's been doing a great job for us. They're in Steamboat. When we've had some issues come up, they've responded right away. So that's the only action item at this point.
Should we take care of that right now?
Great, that'd be fine.
Yeah, we need a board motion directing the staff to enter into a 3-year continuing service agreement with Landmark not to exceed $70,000 for surveying at Wolford.
So moved.
Yeah, motion by Vanderbrink.
Second.
Second by Alvey. You got the assist on that one. And any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. Got one knocked out.
So yes, and a couple of board meetings ago, I started putting in a list of all the agreements we have going, since there seemed to be some
that's good.
need for the board to know
Yeah.
what we're up to, and it also helped me know to remember what I'm up to.
Now, by the current balance, you mean that's the current unexpended balance?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will say that that's not all the contracts, that's the contracts associated
Yeah.
with your OM&R of the dam and the reservoir.
Yeah.
It doesn't include rec area contracts.
Or office cleaning. But these are the things that we're actively utilizing at the moment. The office cleaning gets utilized. So one thing, before I talk about the main gate replacement a little bit, that I didn't put in this memo is, you may recall, we had this crack develop in our road base on the dam crest. Subsequent to our crest rehab project. It's outside the rehab project, but it's in a piece of the dam crest road that we drove on a whole lot. And so we've been taking weekly observations and measurements. As you can imagine, a crack in the dirt is kind of deteriorating. And now we're thawed out enough that we think we can dig it up. And not that we think we have any problem, but we probably will dig this crack up in a trench that's roughly 2 feet deep, 6 feet long, and 2 feet wide, to see the top of the core, to make sure there's no distress in the top of the core at this area. Again, with Landmark, this is a place we used Landmark. When the crack developed, we had them come back and survey, even though they'd only been there a month or so before, as building the crest rehab, just to make sure we didn't have any settlement. So we'll be doing that, and we'll let you know what the results of that excavation are. And frankly, the hole has to be big enough to get a compactor in to put the material back that we dig up. So, and we decided that we're too old to dig it up by hand that big.
I'll just add, we have absolutely no reason to believe that we have any kind of problem up there. This is just belts and suspenders, just making absolutely sure for your future partner Denver Water, division of your dam safety branch, and our local constituents, that we thoroughly vetted this and put it to bed.
And then we can actually erase the crack.
We, the Kremling Town Council and I had a nice visit with Mike Richard about within the last month. And oddly enough, they were very interested in this crack. And, they were glad to know that we were on top of it. They were appreciative of the work and that our engineering staff had done and our PR staff had done in terms of getting this addressed out in the public and communicated. And so I just want to thank. It required, as do most things like this, it showed up late on a Friday afternoon, and required Ray and Chris Treese and John to be very busy over the weekend, Kim and our crew up there, and I just, very dedicated staff and excellent job that they did.
And I'll add that the state is changing its emergency action plan template such that pretty much anything that goes on at a dam gets run up the tree, where there used to be 3 levels of notification. And so we had a bit of an internal learning process too about what the reaction would be of the local press and county emergency manager and fire district and stuff. So we've reached out and made much more contacts so that we're more engaged with these folks on a regular non-event basis. So that was a bit educational for us. Heretofore, something minor like this, we would have called the dam inspector for our division. That would be a Division 6 person, and chatted them up, and she might have called her boss, but we wouldn't have put it out there where the fire department was getting upset. And
Yeah,
so-
and we had lots of discussions going on throughout the town, because once you notify local police and fire, it gets out.
Yeah.
Careful how you activate your.
Ken was getting lots of questions.
I
at the
imagine
grocery
Ken
store.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, so, good learning experience, and we're updating that emergency action plan and becoming more familiar with folks. You know, when you don't have any issues, you kind of lose track. So, you know, Monday we had 14 inches of ice. Today, I guess we have 12, which somebody's gutsy enough to go out there and drill holes in it still. As somebody mentioned earlier, there's some pictures of our gate that's under fabrication in Massachusetts. Hunter's flying out there today to crack the whip on him. He was the most threatening among staff, so. Actually, we have a local consultant out there that's going to assist him, and it's a really good idea for Hunter to get out there and get in the factory and see how things are made.
Yeah.
That hasn't really been part of his experience to date, so this is a real good trip for him. I threw in this picture of the barges that are all parked out there because they're hard to miss. And, you know, we've got quite a bit of work that's going on. The ice out graph, our plan based on the historic ice out was going to be out there this coming Monday morning starting to build barges, but that doesn't seem practical, so essentially we put things off for 2 weeks. The contractor's okay with that, with respect to his other work schedule. So we'd be starting to build barges May 6th. That does a couple of things to us. It makes it more difficult to not have the reservoir come up. Because even though the hydrology's changed slightly, the slope of the curves that's in this packet here is just as, well, do it this way for you, that's like the nuns, but just as steep. And so talking to the contractor, the dive contractor, they'll be able to manage if we end up having to fill the reservoir. And a couple of measures they're taking that I mentioned in the memo, they're going to bring 2 decompression chambers instead of 1 so that they can do dry decompression. Because their operational plan only allows them to have 1 diver in the water at a time. And so at the 20-foot down level, we'd have 50 minutes of work time, 25 minutes of hanging on a rope decompressing. And we'll do away with that 25 minutes. The guy will come out, go right into the chamber, and then a second dive will go down immediately. So we'll save a good half an hour per dive cycle. And so because the schedule will be quicker, they'll probably bring 1 or 2 more divers. So the work probably will go just about as fast, even if we're deeper. The divers actually enjoy this because decompressing in a nice, warm, dry decompression chamber beats the hell out of hanging on a rope for 25 minutes. So it's a good work plan. They've got the capacity with the work platform to put the second chamber out there. And right now we're told that it's not likely that they'll be looking for any additional funding. So, so it's not, you know, if we can't hold the reservoir down, things unravel on us. We've got a good backup plan.
What's the water temperature in the work environment for those divers?
About 85 degrees, because they pump hot water into their suit. They got little tubes that run down their hands and their gloves, and
But the water
so
temperature
at the bottom is going to probably be about
40 degrees,
38 degrees.
Very cold. Yeah.
And we're going to discharge while they're in there, so then they actually like that because it'll suck the silt that they stir up away. So, but because we can only discharge a little bit while they're in there, we're going to have air flow coming in. We're going to go from 15 CFS to 400 or something at the end of the dive day. And so we've done some PR work with the resource agencies. They're not exactly happy about it, but so far they're willing to live with it. And we're going to continue to do some work with the resource.
And I would say not just the resource agencies. Ray and Hunter have actually talked to all of the downstream landowners who may be affected by that diurnal fluctuation.
That's right. So they understand it. There's one significant head gate downstream, and we'll work with them so that their stop boards are in it such that when we crank up, we won't like go out into the fields over top of the structure, but they can still divert. So it'll be an interesting 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's see. So outlet works repair, we're going to try and fix the 96-inch butterfly valve seal again. We're going to put a new key in the actuator connection so it doesn't rock. And we're going to replace the 30-inch butterfly valve that's downstream of the sleeve valve and is stuck. So got a contract in the works with the local hydraulic mechanic to do this work, and then also Pratt to come back out and help us set the travel on the gate so that it engages the seal properly. Let's see. Butterfly valve.
Guard gate?
Guard gate. The guard gate is the gate at the very upstream end of the pipe in the tower that keeps the water out of the pipe if we wanted to shut it off that way. And it has a rubber seal at the bottom, and it's not been in place for some time. We're going to have made a better retainer bar and a better seal. Turns out the gate manufacturer is still using the same arrangement. So we're having to go independent and get our own stuff made. We're going to use a reinforced rubber seal with nylon reinforcing in it.
Okay, good. I remember replacing that once.
Custom made. So what this has brought about, though, is an examination of our safety protocols. And so we're going to be 800 foot up this pipe, and turns out we've never had a problem going up there, but now we have lots of new protocols, which is going to include being tethered and being hooked to a winch that could drag us out on our head if we were unresponsive on our radio. And so it's going to be a learning experience for us to go in and do this retaining seal retainer replacement. And we're developing a work plan. We've had 3 or 4 meetings about it. And we'll be buying some equipment that's under the general manager's authority, but we'll have a much more enhanced protocol for entering this confined space.
Good.
Yeah, this is just a basic safety issue for our staff. We have we have several confined spaces on the projects we own and or operate, and we technically are exempt from OSHA standards on those confined spaces, but frankly, making sure our employees are safe when they enter these and we can extract them in the safest way possible and quickest way possible is important to me and important to our staff. So we are engaging in a pretty systematic review of safety protocols. And really, John and Ray are doing the lion's share of that work, and I greatly appreciate the work they do.
I have to say that we weren't really being quite safe previously.
I'm not suggesting that you weren't.
No, I'm not. But just, I mean, we weren't just cowboying it. We were.
Well, in AECOM, previously URS, we really have ramped up our safety protocols over the past decade, too. All those things have changed. Now, you might consider using older staff or older board members, because they have less residual value.
Exactly.
I'm not going to kind of like ask
There is some, we do have a requirement for some nimbleness.
Oh, okay.
We got the older covered right here.
Wow. Well, so I think, by the way, Ray, if you just remember, that was Dave volunteering to do work. and
just had a birthday.
We just needed to get certified for out of confined space before we send it.
Yeah.
We can do that in about 15 minutes.
Mr. Vanderbrink.
So you're talking about going up into your penstock.
Yeah.
Is there any value to doing any additional work that might be preventative, like measuring metal thicknesses while you're in there as well?
Inspection.
Inspection of
Well,
your
certainly
penstock
we'll
as well?
inspect a conduit, and heretofore we've gone in the conduit at least nominally at least every other year. At Elkhead, we pretty much go in every year. To measure metal thicknesses takes ultrasound, and when we were looking for voids behind the conduit in the concrete encasement, we learned that there's a very thin film of water behind the conduit, or a space, you know, because the steel shrinks a little more than the concrete over time. And so we were having some challenges with the non-destructive testing, looking at looking for voids behind the conduit. So it's not in our standard protocol to look at metal thicknesses. When we had TV'd through holes we drilled in the conduit for grouting, there's not even rust on the backside of the conduit. It's totally anoxic in there, and so we don't really have any concerns about that. We did have some significant paint failures, large sheets of paint, 15 to 18% of the conduit surface that we patched back in 2010, and we'll take a look at those areas. But that's to the extent of the inspection we'll do. We do have, in addition to putting the rubber seal back in the guard gate, there's some issues with the adjustments on the back side of the guard gate, so we will be drawing straws to see who stays in the conduit when the guard gate gets closed, and they can put the wedge back on that's missing and make some adjustments to the wedges. We'll also have an extraction method from the top of the tower, so we'll be able to Peter Pan somebody out if we can't get the gate back open again, but we're going to practice a bunch of times first with the gate. So, you know, all this work has been something that we kind of all have carried around in our heads because we've been in there before and how we go about it, but having to write it all down does make a different challenge, and then you find out that, you know, you have a larger shopping list than you thought for stuff, and so we're getting after that. It's been interesting and educational, because to be able to retrieve somebody that's on the end of an 800-foot long piece of rope is no mean feat. So,
So that's what's going on in Wolford this summer.
So Elkhead is pretty simple. Everything is in pretty good shape there. The fish net last year, though, submerged at about 600 CFS, and it's designed for over 2,000. So that was a problem. There's been a lot of discussion about cleaning of the net, because if it's clogged up, it's not going to work as effectively. And, you know, now that we've handed off the net to Parks and Wildlife and the CRWCD, that's all on them. Our net manufacturer did come in and put a second row of floats on the net, so essentially they're slightly smaller, but increased the flotation by about 70% to help with the submergence issue at no cost. So as we come up to spill it, over the next couple of days, we should hit 700 CFS.
Yeah, I think Friday we spilled, maybe Saturday, initially 500 over the spillway in the net, and then maybe 700 towards the end of the weekend.
So right now we have 200 going out the outlet works, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we want to manage how we come up, because if we do end up with a situation where the net is not clean enough or some other reason it submerges, we don't want to spill bass into the river. But we were letting out 5 CFS until last week, because that's our winter release, and then it got warm. And we started coming up, and so we initially went to 15 to kind of let the people downstream know that there was water coming if they didn't read their email or look at their voice messages. But we emailed all of them and phoned everybody that we could get a hold of. And then we went up to 200, so that we've got that part of the outlet works engaged. And
on Friday, yeah.
And so the creek is ice-free, the reservoir is not. So, but we are able to free the net and the debris boom from ice, because we have this air de-icing system around the outlet tower. And the net and the debris boom is east of the tower, so if we crank that up higher, the warm water plume gets blown to the east from the westerly wind, and it's de-iced all that in about 4 days. So that helps with any potential damage to the net from it rising with the ice sheet. What we want to avoid, though, is pushing a lot of slush ice into that net and hugging it up and tearing it up. So we're going to carefully manage the rise of the reservoir to spill the best we can so that we don't shove a bunch of ice into the net. Should we not be able to have the reservoir ice sheet free when this peak that's coming along that we expect now, we expect there'll be other peaks because we got a ton of snow upstream, and so we'll be able to test the net for spilling, in a few weeks once the ice sheet's totally off. And Elkhead's 1,000 feet lower than Wolford, so.
Mark thought it'd be ice-free by Friday, did he? Just texted.
Okay.
We blew off last week Monday.
Your ice is off?
Yep.
And you're another 1,000 feet lower than we are.
Yeah, and you got much bigger flow through it too.
400 CFS right now.
Really, just 400?
450, something like that.
So, thank you for approving Landmark's contract. Any other questions at this point?
Any questions from the board?
What's for lunch?
What's for lunch?
Hearing none? Some closing comments, Mr. Manager, here on.
Thank you very much.
Future meetings. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Future meetings, I just want to draw your attention, obviously our normal quarterly meeting. The seminar, we've had some trouble scheduling that this year due to our the renovations going on at Two Rivers. We have arrived, however, at a permanent date. We've been moving it around as recently as this week. Jim, is that right, or do you have something? I agree with your last email, Jim. That's what I'm saying.
Stay the course.
Stay the course. We're going to have the seminar as we have published here, September 18th. That is a Wednesday. So what we are doing is asking that on a Thursday we have a budget meeting in Grand Junction. So our budget meeting has historically occurred on the Thursday a week earlier in Grand Junction, the day before a Friday seminar. We're going to have the seminar first and then the budget meeting, primarily because it's a Thursday is, at least on most of the county schedules, not a county commissioner meeting day. And so we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. Hopefully you can all make it to both. And we are having that not at Mesa State University as the agenda says, but at CMU at Colorado Mesa University. Apologize to anybody here like Steve who might be connected with that institution for naming it wrong.
I didn't even notice.
All right. The other issue that is I want to call out, when we published this agenda, we thought the West Slope Joint Roundtable meeting was actually occurring May 2nd. It has been pushed back to June 20. June 20th. It will be held at Utewater. Realize that is going to impact some folks who probably work for a living and have to move cattle around and things like that. That is the time frame that we could make work. Some of that delay has to do with trying to make sure that we're using people's time well with the phase 3 of risk study reports and actually having substantive information that's understandable to people. And as was mentioned earlier in our meeting, we will do our best to get those results on phase 3 and report out several weeks in advance of that June 20th meeting. So the Summer Water Convention at CWC, let us know if anybody's interested in going to that August 20th and 22nd. Interestingly enough, there is a plan for a statewide Basin Roundtable Summit. I believe certainly the first in my memory. Maybe there's been one before that. Chris says yes.
Yeah, no, they've had.
So it's in within our district. It's in Winter Park. Our director from Mesa County suggested that anybody possible try to take the train to Winter Park,
Yeah, stops right in Winter Park.
Stops right in Winter Park, stops right here in town. Otherwise.
But usually it will make it on the same day it's scheduled.
There's rarely a problem of timeliness going west to east. It gets way out of whack going east to west.
Yeah.
So I think those are the highlights. I do want to thank everybody for participating and showing up, and really appreciate the input the board provides at these meetings. And it's valuable to me and the rest of staff. So thank you.
And one other, if you could, or you or Mr. Trees could make a mention of the Water Trust Award we're getting.
Yeah. John can mention it.
John's on the board of the Colorado Water Trust.
Well, yeah, the Colorado Water Trust every year provides an award that they call the David Getch's Flowing Water Award to an entity or a person that's been instrumental in kind of working with the Water Trust and streamlining enhancement issues or generally working collaboratively within the water industry. And this year they've awarded the David Getch's Flowing Water Award to the River District. And I think that's largely comes about pursuant to some of the activities that this board has done, and pursuant to what staff has been able to do. For example, Senate Bill 1319, water conservation plans. Up until February, CWCB meeting in March, the River District was the only entity in the state that had approved conservation plans, pursuant to Senate Bill 19. CWCB now has one under their belt in the San Miguel County. So, you've given us tools to work with. I think thanks to people like Dawn and, I'll say myself, we've been able, like in a year last year, we've been able to really make things work. I'm thinking specifically here in the Colorado drainage where we had storage supplies we could work with. Make things work for everybody, including our ag users and our environmental users, and speaking specifically of the 15-mile reach endangered fish flows, just trying to make things work. And we have a team here that can really make things work. And I think for those, the ability to make things work and to work collaboratively and work creatively, the Water Trust has awarded us this David Getch's Flowing Waters Award.
If I can add to that, I think Peter correctly likes to point out that when people give the River District a hard time for our perceived opposition to proposed, our district does more to put wet water in the rivers on the western slope than any other organization. And when you look at last year during a severe drought, John's pretty humble about it, but he was able to coordinate with a number of entities who own water in Rudai, who all agreed to release it down to the power plant and the irrigators down in the Grand Valley. And by doing that, had incredible beneficial effects on stream temperatures and fish populations, starting at the tail waters of the Rudai Dam all the way down the river. And it benefited the economies and the people of Garfield County, of Aspen, or Pitkin County,
Aspen County, yeah.
Pitkin County, Eagle County, the Grand County, Mason County. It benefited the farmers down in the valley for having being able to finish their crops where they otherwise would have had trouble in a year where the HUP pool was running out. And so it really is a feat of work that happened. We also, at the same time, released additional water to the endangered fish program out of Elkhead help extend their ability to keep the Yampa wet for those endangered fish. Our releases out of Wolford, while just perhaps accidentally timed this way, happened to come in one of the driest years in the upper Colorado River. We had rafting companies who normally raft on Clear Creek moving their entire operations up to Kremling so that they could have commercial rafting people, and it brought a boom to the Kremling economy to have that happen. And that was because of the water that we were releasing out of Wolford Mountain Reservoir. It really is a collaborative effort that happens that way, and I just think the district, frankly, it's nice to see the recognition coming, but it is really something that when we talk about the value we bring to our communities and the need for an organization like this is really part of the critical efforts that exist. Even I'm looking at Commissioner Hanson. I mean, the releases that are going through the Black Canyon, and we're in a drought year like last year, that boost the economies in Montrose and Delta County. Those were hard-fought releases by our legal staff and our technical staff and the operations of the Black Canyon. And so there's efforts all throughout the district where we're helping bring water in very critical years to those streams.
We've made significant investments over the past 3 decades in water and water resources and purchasing or building storage.
We also need to credit one of our energy company partners that contributed. Which energy company was it?
Well, Exxon. Exxon has a 6,000 acre-foot Rudai contract that they offered up as well last year. And so, yes, they definitely deserve credit for stepping up and being willing to do that. And they certainly are willing and eager, actually, to be a collaborative partner in these things.
But it was Exxon. It was a number of the municipalities that also own water in Rudai. I mean,
These are all examples of the diverse partnerships the River District engages in.
Yeah.
Just one follow-up. When we, at the legal staff and working with external affairs, insist upon these savings clause language in the in-stream flow bills that have come up in the last legislative session or this one, that's the reason why. It's because we're doing these other things that are outside, in most cases, outside of the in-stream flow program, that get vastly more wet water into the river than a decreed water right with a junior priority of in-stream flow, and we need to protect our ability to do that.
Good. Yeah, I mean the operations last week on Shoshone were really outside the normal water rights system. So we've been able to work in and out of that system to make things work.
Yeah, and then certainly, I would say that when push comes to shove on the river, this is an extremely collaborative process that involves everybody from the Trans Mountain diverters to the irrigators in the Grand Valley. And otherwise, when you're really trying to make things happen, everybody is working together to make things happen.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'd point out, I attended my first ever annual HUP wrap-up meeting here in this room.
That was exciting, wasn't it?
Wow. That Don presided over. And I have said Don brought up the issue that we may have these fluctuations at Wolford Mountain, and there was some concern voiced that may interfere with the Shoshone call. And immediately our partners who we've helped out in situations in that whole HP world, Denver Water and the Bureau of Reclamation stepped up and said, we can help figure out how to make sure those flows can work. And that's really a tribute to Don and John's work there. So.
Well, and it's not just the legal relationships, it's the personal relationships where you can say, come on, George, I helped you, can you help me on this one? And having that ability to really have that personal relationship, and folks will bend over backwards to help you with that.
Oh, yes, ultimately this is about relationships.
Yeah.
Don't we also have the Basin Roundtable Summit coming up April or May or something?
No, that was one
That's one that's been changed to
West Slope, that's June. It's June 20th.
Now June 20th. It was scheduled for May, but we had to move it back.
Yep.
So it is June 20th. and Ute Water.
I didn't see that on.
Yeah,
It's in there.
And he corrected it.
But it's on the wrong
Yeah.
date, but
Yeah.
it's the old date.
Yeah.
Apparently can't read.
Is there lunch upstairs?
There is lunch upstairs.
There's
with
lunch
boxes.
upstairs?
Yeah, boxes.
Motion
Take one
to,
and hit the road.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved, second, all in favor, say aye.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to get that in. Melee going on here.
I think it's, yes, I was like, all these different things. Yeah. Yeah, that was.
You know, I mean, it's. Great.
Yeah.
This is what we need to be.
Yes, yeah.
I used to tell my clients.
Safe travel.
Nice to it. I'm like, all right.
Okay, thank you, buddy.
Oh, I know.
Oh, yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen.
I hope that doesn't happen either. Free on this weekend's last weekend.
Oh, my God.
Oh, you will have that?
Yeah, and
Oh, no, I think they're
day.
We
had a good day that day, but we were pretty well.
We appreciate you.
Maybe you need one? Oh, you've actually, you got an insider, huh?
For driving up, I wanted my sister to see it before I did. Yeah.
You need a voucher.
I think mine's out there. You got extra
We
one?
have extras, yes.
Okay, good, you have it. Took my backpack out of the car, I guess.
We included it in the packet.
Yeah, I printed it out.
Oh, you did?
It was in my, I think I took my backpack out of the car last night. Looked everything else here, but I guess I took it out.
Is that right?
Yeah, no. We have all the other.
From above, yeah.
No.